Good evening and welcome to the April 9th, 2025 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. Paper copies of the agenda are available for those here in person, and the full packet is available on our website. First, reviewing our agenda, we have two proclamations. One is for the Senior Volunteer Appreciation Day, and Commissioner Reed will be reading that proclamation. And then we'll do a proclamation for National Public Health Week, and Commissioner Anderson will read that proclamation. Then we will consider our consent agenda. There are 6 items tonight on our consent agenda. After our consent agenda, we'll have general public comment. We welcome general public comment for addressing issues not on today's agenda, but otherwise related to county business. Given our limited time and the need to have orderly and efficient meetings, we apply certain rules regarding public comments. We'll do our best to enforce these rules consistently and without regard to the point of view expressed by the speaker. Here are the rules. 1, each speaker will be limited to a total of 3 minutes of speaking time. However, we will accept public comment of any length in writing. 2, individual speakers may not donate unused time to other speakers. All comments must address topics. This is the third one, if you're keeping up. 3, all comments must address topics within the jurisdiction of the County Commission. And 4, we reserve the right to mute and remove any speaker whose comments are threatening, aggressively hostile, or belligerent. Campaigning for public office during the public comment period is not allowed. We ask you to give your full name and address for our meeting minutes and address your comments to the Commission. Please note that the comments received by the Commission during our meetings do not necessarily represent the views of Douglas County government, but we value the input. We don't usually respond to general public comment on the spot, but if you leave your contact information with county staff, we'll try and get specific question answers. After our public comment section, we'll go on to our regular agenda. There are 5 items on our regular agenda. Today, we're going to consider a resolution to authorize sale of general obligation sales tax improvement bonds for the JLE. Then we'll look at a comprehensive plan amendment next. We have a site plan to consider for the Hamudor Quarry. Item 4 is the alternative to 9/11 emergency response update. That one is information only. And then a presentation from Laura's Douglas County Fire Medical, and that one is information only as well. For each action item, we'll hear from staff or the applicant, followed by questions from the Commission, and then open up the item for public comment relevant to that item. Once public comment is closed, we'll bring the item back to the Commission, and if votes are necessary, we will do those votes and have further discussion. Lastly, a recording of this meeting will be available on the county's YouTube page and website. So with that, we'll jump into our agenda, and we'll start with Senior Volunteer Appreciation Day. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Whereas volunteers make an important impact on the capacity and success of Douglas County's many social service and nonprofit organizations, and whereas as many as 30% of all people 65 and older volunteer throughout our community, and whereas these senior volunteers give of their time, their talents, and their treasures, and whereas without the impact of these seniors, many organizations would struggle to fulfill their service missions, and whereas generational knowledge, experience, and histories not otherwise accessible is shared with those striving to make a better future. And whereas many senior volunteers are heard saying that they do this in order to give back to the community. And whereas these hours of volunteer service represent a level of generosity and compassion which the rest of the community can emulate. Now, therefore, it be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas hereby proclaim the week of April 17th, 2025 as Senior Volunteer Appreciation Day. We encourage all residents and visitors to express their gratitude for the impact of the hours of service given by senior volunteers throughout Douglas County. Adopted this 9th day of April 2025. And I believe there's Megan. Megan's still with us. Come on up to the podium and share whatever you'd like with us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Commissioners. April is Volunteer Appreciation Month, and that's in the big population. All volunteers, of course, are much appreciated at the Senior Resource Center and a lot of our colleagues around the community who benefit significantly from senior volunteers in particular. This is something very important to us, and so I'll take this opportunity. Any Individuals who are a senior that volunteers in Douglas County is invited to an open house reception on April 17th from 4 to 6. And it's just a chance for us to express our gratitude. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Megan. Commissioner Dorsey has your proclamation. He'll sign it real quick and get it to you. Got this really nice room, but no pens that work. Yeah. We'll move on to National Public Health Week. And Commissioner Anderson will read that proclamation.
Whereas the week of April 7th, 2025 is National Public Health Week, and the theme is It Starts Here, highlighting the important role that we all share in contributing to the health of our communities, our homes, our state, our country, and the rest of the world. And whereas this marks the 30th anniversary of celebrating National Public Health Week, and in the past 30 years, significant strides have been made in public health, including advancements in disease prevention, pandemic preparedness, enhanced maternal and child health programs, and countless community health initiatives that enable communities like Douglas County to thrive. And whereas public health professionals foster collaboration with city and county staff, community partners, education officials, healthcare providers, and several other stakeholders who each play a vital role in shaping the health of our community by working together to create abundant and equitable opportunities for all Douglas County residents to live healthy lives. And whereas the well-being of our county depends on strong public health initiatives, including efforts to develop policies, combat chronic diseases, promote physical and mental health, improve environmental health, and expand access to healthy food, safe and affordable housing, and clean air and water. And whereas efforts to support public health will continue to transform systems to ensure that everyone has fair and just opportunities to be as healthy as possible, regardless of social status. And whereas National Public Health Week acknowledges the contributions and successes of the public health system and serves as a time to appreciate the hard work and dedication of public health professionals. Now, therefore, the Board of County Commissioners of Douglas County, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the week of April 7, 2025 as National Public Health Week. And I encourage all Douglas County residents to take part in this week by supporting Lawrence Douglas County Public Health and public health professionals and the communities that they serve. Adopted on this 9th day of April 2025.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. And Jonathan Smith is here if you'd like to address the commission, and we'll get your proclamation signed.
Push the button. There we go. Good evening, commissioners. Good evening to the rest of Douglas County. I get really passionate about this stuff, and I know you got a lot of stuff on your agenda. So to avoid me going into a sermon and taking a long time, I wrote some stuff down. So I'm going to stay on this. Thank you for recognizing National Public Health Week with this proclamation and for your continued commitment to building a healthier Douglas County. This year's theme, It Starts Here, is a powerful reminder that health doesn't begin in a clinic or emergency room. It starts in our neighborhoods, our policies, and our everyday decisions. At Lawrence Douglas County Public Health, we understand that health means more than avoiding illness. It means creating the conditions where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Conditions like stable access to stable housing, behavioral health support, food security, access to care, healthy birth outcomes, and anti-poverty, all of which are focus areas of your community health improvement plan, which you may or may not have just received copies of. Our team works every day to promote health, prevent disease, and protect residents of Douglas County. That includes behind-the-scene efforts like the proactive work that we're doing right now in response to the measles outbreak that's happening in Southwest Kansas. While our county hasn't seen any cases, we're staying vigilant by educating, coordinating, and preparing so that we can continue to keep our community safe. National Public Health Week celebrates times where communities band together to promote health. A recent example of that is the COVID-19 pandemic, which is one of the biggest tests that our country's public health system has ever faced. And Douglas County met that moment with determination and collaborative efforts to protect our community. It wasn't just our department, it was local leaders, organizations, and everyday people who pulled together to protect one another. That experience continues to shape how we approach challenges with urgency, creativity, and community-driven collaboration. So this week, we celebrate public health, not just as a profession, but as a community-wide effort. And I want to especially thank the incredible team at Lawrence Douglas County Public Health. Their dedication, compassion, and daily efforts make a profound difference in people's lives. So thank you again for everyone's leadership in making Douglas County a healthier, more equitable place for all. So thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I think Commissioner Dorsey can hand you your proclamation there. Appreciate you being here. All right. With that, we will move on to our consent agenda. Commissioners, is there any item from the consent agenda you'd like to have removed for further discussion? Seeing none, anyone in the public like to have a consent agenda item removed for further discussion? Anyone online, Sarah? All right, commissioners, I'd welcome a motion on the consent agenda.
As Commissioner Reed, I move to approve items 2.1 through 2.6.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. We'll move on to general public comment. If you'd like to provide general public comment, now is the time. Step right up to the podium there. There is a sign-up sheet just to the left of the podium. You may do that before you start or after, but we would like to have your name for our minutes.
My name is Ellen Johnson, and I would like to see more sober living environments in Douglas County. Shawnee County has 178,000 residents and 44 Oxford houses, and Douglas County has 112,000 residents and 12 Oxford houses. So the reason we need more is because TRC is great, but detox is not enough. And sober living environments such as Oxford are sustainable and effective when they can house about 8 to 12 individuals. These are more cost effective and they provide more options for social support from house members. So larger houses are better, and I'd like to see this happen. Oxford houses are critical to reduced recidivism for both criminal and addictive behavior and lead to better long-term outcomes for substance use disorder and criminal behavior. I also want to say, that at 25%, and this was a sample size of only 150 people, but at 24 months, Oxford residents are 75% employed versus 46% of individuals assigned to the usual care. And similarly, people living in Oxford are more than twice as likely to regain full custody of their children if they've been lost to the state, and half as likely to lose rights permanently. Oxford houses are sustainable, they're good neighbors, they pose no risk to the community, there's no increase in crime rates in neighborhoods where Oxford houses are situated, and residents in Oxford are helpful. They participate in recovery, in the recovery community, helping other people get clean and stay clean, and they engage with their communities by attending community meetings, and they volunteer in substantial numbers in the community. So if this community hasn't seen that, it's because we haven't let it happen, and we should. Oxford houses are also cost effective. They're largely self-governing and self-supporting through rent paid by residents. And this is absolutely critical in a time when we're looking at federal, cuts to spending for mental health treatment and drug treatment and other such programs. This is a really low financial investment with a really high payoff. So in addition to this, I want to say that I also see a lack of supported housing, like AHH, Artists Helping the Homeless, and Hearthstone for people with severe mental illness and drug addiction, many of whom are transitioning from jail or prison. These are some of the most vulnerable and dangerous members of our society, yet programs like Artists Helping the Homeless help many successfully change their lives. Spots in supported housing in Douglas County are extremely hard to get. And when my late partner lost his place in supported housing, he desperately searched for a sober living environment here, but there was no room at the inn. He had to leave town to find housing, and so he lost his medical care, his substance abuse treatment, and his mental health care. He lost everything he needed to get better. But he didn't give up. He kept trying and he kept fighting until the end, but he lost the fight. And he's now housed in the cemetery. And I think that we can do better.
Any other public comment?
John Ims, Lawrence, Kansas. As you know, I've been lobbying for some time, 3 minutes at a time, for measurable metrics regarding the homeless program to be put on the county website. I think it's a requirement to show the accountability of the commissioners with the money that's being spent. Last week, I believe, I showed 14 years of point in time data that's available not on the county website, but available in local newspaper, Lawrence Times. I think that's an example of a measurable metric. After having dug through the county flexible housing program documentation, of which there is lots, I came across, this is an orange bar chart, which I do not expect you to be able to read because it is available on your website. It's on page 10 of the CSH 2022 report. It does illustrate the population and the housing needs that is meant to be provided to the various population, running from, of course, homeless individuals and families, chronic, non-chronic, child welfare families, juvenile justice, transitioned age youth. I was surprised to see that the two tallest bars on the chart are those associated with IDD individuals and individuals age 65 in nursing homes. On the surface, to me at least, they don't seem like homeless. They were either institutionalized or in a nursing home. Nevertheless, they're classified among these sets of populations. These populations are relatively, I think, unknown to the tax-paying public that we're servicing. And I think it certainly is worthwhile as a metric to be able to show year to year that these populations are being serviced and how those numbers are changing. That's 14 different populations there. Each one of those populations is de-identified, meaning that, and it's summarized, there's no specific individuals identified, so that it's useful data just to see the status of the program. It can be further broken down, such as showing what the behavioral health outcomes are for each of those populations, the emergency health care used, the involvement with criminal legal system, if there is any. And each of those categories can be further broken down. The point is, these are all measurable metrics that can be presented to the public over time to show how this program is functioning. We need to do more than just report point in time or housing needs. We actually need to show impact on the people that are being serviced and what kind of service are being consumed. Thank you.
Okay, any other public comment here at the courthouse? Anyone online, Sarah? Okay. We appreciate all those who come and provide public comment. We'll move on to our regular agenda, and the first item is to consider a resolution to authorize the sale of general obligation sales tax improvement bonds, Series 2025-A, to support the renovation of the Judicial Law Enforcement Center and the construction of the Public Safety Building. And I see Garth from, it's my favorite, Garth. Yes.
Commissioners, this is Garth Herman with Gilmore and Bell, the county's bond counsel. You can just hold the whole thing up, Garth. You're
If
way
I
too
remember
tall.
correctly
Yeah.
from last time, it was easier for me to just hold it. So I appreciate you having me out tonight. As you mentioned, Garth Herman with Gilmore and Bell, the county's bond counsel. As you mentioned, this resolution before you will authorize the sale of the general obligation sales tax bonds to finance a portion of the cost of the Judicial and Law Enforcement Center project, as well as the public safety building improvements. It's currently anticipated that the amount of those bonds are going to be $55,750,000, which, in conjunction with available county funds, will be used to pay the full estimated cost of that project of approximately $82 million. This resolution authorizes the sale of those bonds at a public auction bid. The sale will occur at 10 o'clock in the morning on May the 7th, at which point my firm, working with county staff and Baker Tilly, the county's financial advisor, will evaluate the bids, determine the best bidder, which will effectively be the lowest interest cost to the county. At that point, we will update the documents for the county commission meeting that night, at which point you'll be able to consider the bids, award the sale to the best bidder, and adopt the bond resolution. The bond issue is scheduled to close on May the 28th. There's not going to be a need for a county commission meeting that day. Instead, that's the day that the purchaser will wire transfer the funds to the county's bank account in exchange for possession of the bond. Once that occurs, my office, working with the investment bank, will close the bond issue and alert everybody. And at that point, you will have approximately $55.7 million to use towards your project. As I mentioned, this resolution authorizes that sale to occur in early May. It also authorizes us, county staff, and Baker Tilly to take necessary actions leading up to that sale, including required publications, rating agency action, that sort of thing. So at this point, I will pause for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions, commissioners?
Hi, based on current political activities, do you have any idea what's going on with bond rates?
Easiest answer, no. But a slightly longer answer is that, yeah, there is turmoil in the market right now. One of the nice things is that this sale is not scheduled to occur for about a month. And so there's some hope that things will kind of smooth out by then. The other nice thing about bonds like this is Douglas County has a good credit rating. And especially with the bond issue like this, where it is, in essence, secured to the repayment from two different sources. The first being the revenues from that sales tax, which are well in excess of what the anticipated debt service requirements are going to be. And then it's backed up by the general obligation pledge of the county. So having that double backing is good. Having a good credit rating is good. Having the sale about a month from now, like I said, hopefully we'll have the market give them enough time to kind of figure out what's going on.
My question may be for Sarah and maybe for Garth. I'm not quite sure. If we approve this evening, does that set May 7th as the date? Or would there be, if we're looking at the market and thinking not a good, if this was yesterday, that might be a bit challenging. That's my question.
Garth, you can sort of talk about what flexibility we have. I would say from a cash flow perspective, we really want to secure funds by, so we have a little bit of room if we get the proceeds in late May, but we need to, for our cash flow to continue to work on the project, we need this issuance to happen this summer.
Yep. So exactly agree with that. So this resolution does set, in essence, the May 7th sale date. Now, if for some reason at some point over the next couple of weeks, if things don't get better, if they get worse, evaluating this with county staff, there's nothing to say that we would not be able to come in and say, we're going to delay the sale for 2 weeks, something like that. So really up until right around May 7th. If for some reason, if we need to change the plan, we'll still have the flexibility to do that. We could provide notice to the market to say, this May 7th sale, we're actually going to delay it for a little bit. We'll hit the market, when things have calmed down. So This does set that date, but it doesn't set it in stone.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions here at the commission level. We'll take public comment on this item. Is there anyone here at the courthouse who'd like to provide public comment? Anyone online, Sarah? Okay, bring it back up to the commission for any further discussion and or motions.
Seeing no discussion, oh, I turned to the wrong page. I move to approve a resolution to authorize the sale of general obligation sales tax improvement bonds, Series 2025-A, to support the renovation of the Judicial and Law Enforcement Center and Public Safety Building. Did I get all that? It's cut off on the paper. Okay.
Sorry.
I second it.
Motion and second. Any further discussion, commissioners? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
All right, we'll move on to the second item, which is to consider a comprehensive plan amendment, AMDT 241004 to Plan 2040, Chapter 8B, for those of you flipping through your comprehensive plan. Specific land use plans for W west of K10 plan. Mary Miller is here. Hi, Mary. Mary, make sure that.
I just turned it
Good,
on.
okay.
City County Planner. And as you mentioned, this is a comprehensive plan amendment. It's to the west of K10 plan. It's for property that is next page there. It's at the very west side of Lawrence. The west of K10 plan covers some property in Lawrence and then on over west of K10. The subject property is outlined in bold. Actually, the subject property is part of the Floret Hill development. This is land that's going to be developed as affordable housing with a small neighborhood commercial component. The smaller yellow parcel within that was purchased by the city in 1990s. They had plans that might be needed for a fire station or a police station. This area hadn't been annexed yet. But as the city grew, it turned out they didn't need a police station here. One was built over on Overland Drive. And also the fire station optimization plan showed that a fire station here would be duplicating services. So in 2022, the city transferred the ownership to tenants to homeowners. And in the transfer agreement, they said that tenants to homeowners would build affordable housing with a small component of neighborhood commercial. Some key points with a comprehensive plan amendment is to be approved. It must be approved by all three reviewing bodies, Planning Commission, the City Commission, and the County Commissioners. The rezoning application, though, is not contingent upon this approval. It can move forward. It's just one of the review criteria. The West of K10 plan was adopted in 2009, and it's currently undergoing an overall comprehensive update. And this amendment would revise the land use recommendation from public and institutional uses to medium density residential and neighborhood scale commercial uses. And the comprehensive plan, the long range plan for K10 did not put any of this into the text, but they did show it on the map. I think when they wrote the plan, they knew this was kind of a loose idea. So it's not in the text. The only change that is needed is to the future land use recommendation map. So on this left side, we see currently it's recommended all for public institutional uses. And the proposed on the right would change that to medium density residential, and the pink area would be the neighborhood scale commercial. The staff report did discuss this. It is a result of a change of conditions as general public and institutional uses are no longer needed there. And item 7, it would advance interest and that it would facilitate affordable housing. The proposal is to build kind of mixed housing types with apartments and row houses here and some duplexes. And so staff does recommend approval of the amendment and adoption of the joint ordinance resolution. And I don't believe there's an applicant here today on this item. Oh, there is. If you have any questions for him, he is here, and I'll be happy to answer questions too.
Thank you, Mary. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mary or the
I had
applicant?
a question, Mary. Has the city approved this yet?
Yes, the city commission did approve it.
Okay.
Other questions? Did you say the applicant is here? Do you have a statement you want to make at all, or?
Aaron Gasper, CFS Engineers. Nothing really to add, Mary. Thank you, Mary. She did a good job covering anything, but here to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I don't think commissioners have any more questions. Is there anybody here at the courthouse who would like to provide public comment on this item? Anyone online? No one online. We'll close public comment, bring it back up for motions, comments. What else you got, commissioners?
I'm not sure that this is really a question and more of a comment, but it's just kind of ironic that at the time when we're talking about the need for new stations for LDCFM, that we've also got this property that the city had a hold of and apparently has let go of. Happy with the intended use and understand all of that. It's just just a strange conversation that we don't know where future stations would go, but apparently it won't be this property. So I guess I would ask Mary that you mentioned that a station was built on Overland Drive, or is there a property that's been acquired on Overland Drive?
Police station.
Got it. Thank you. I had fire on my mind.
Anything else, Commissioner Willie? Okay, I'm happy to make a motion. We need more housing. I understand the city doesn't need it anymore. To approve a comprehensive plan amendment AMDT 24-1004 to Plan 2040, Chapter 8B, specific plans revising the West K10 plan to revise the recommendation future land use designation and recommendations for the southeast corner of the intersection of K10 Highway and Bob Billings Parkway, and adopt joint ordinance number 10124 and county resolution number 25-17.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further conversation? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you, Mary. And we'll move on to to consider a site plan SP 25-0004, revising phases of the Ham Eudora Quarry at 1232 East 2300 Road. And Mary is back.
Mary Miller, City County Planner, and this is a site plan for the Ham Eudora Quarry, and it is for a changing to the phases. And the phases for this quarry were never established by conditions, and they were just established by the operator. So this change can be done with a site plan rather than requiring a new conditional use permit. The quarry is just southeast of the city of Eudora, and it's very close to the Johnson County boundary. So property owners in both counties were notified. This shows the boundary of the CUP. The entire area is not available for quarrying. On the east side, you can see where the quarrying ends. There's a creek there, and there can't be any quarrying to the east of that. There's a setback for the woodland area. And then on the west side, to kind of see where the green area is, follow my cursor, there's a stream in this area, and then off to the north. Quarrying cannot go to the west of that stream. It's noted on the CUP as a possible future quarrying, but that would take a new conditional use permit. This shows the phases of the quarry. It was, as I noted in the staff report, it's been expanded a few times. And so this was the most recent expansion. And so phase 1 is shown in green. The area that's outlined in green but not colored is a part that was removed from phase 1 but was retained for reclamation. So I think the most important part here was just to make sure we keep all of phase 1 on our mind for when we reclaim it. And then also the eastern side of the former peatfish quarry down in the bottom, that has to be reclaimed with phase 1 as well. And so what they're proposing is to expand phase one's area. And they can explain this to you better than I can, but they've explained that it's a deep area where they're mining. And so sometimes they find levels of limestone that is one type of material and they find other types at different levels and they all sell at different rates. So they don't want to have to close up and move on before they've depleted what they have. And that's why they want to expand the area. And so this, on the top left, you'll see what we have now. And this shows phase one expanded. It's taking over some of phase two and then just highlighting all of phase one so we don't lose track of it. Phase two has about the same area, but it goes down to the south. And then phase three will be a very small phase, kind of a finish up phase. With the CUP conditions, one phase has to be reclaimed before they can go more than 10 acres into the next phase. And by reclaimed, I mean it has to be final graded and seeded, but the vegetation doesn't have to be fully established, but we do have to have that set. And so this shows the reclamation plan. This is going to be reclaimed primarily as a large pond. Their plan is for it to be a large recreational facility. And so this darker area, this shows where the contours will occur. It's necessary to grade 25 feet below the anticipated water level, just so there's an exit route for anything that gets in the pond. And then, of course, above the water level, and then where the area is level. There is no requirement in the reclamation plan to maintain the base of the pond. So as they move into phase two, they can keep depositing into the bottom of the pond. The reclamation plan allows the pond to be shallower. It just can't get deeper without coming back to you. And so staff does recommend approval of this site plan, allowing the phases to change as shown based on the findings in the staff report. And the applicant is present today, and I'll be happy to answer questions if you have any for me.
Thank you, Mary. Any questions for Mary before we move on to the applicant? Doesn't look like it. The applicant would like to make any kind of statement.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Patrick Watkins. I'm an attorney here in town. With me is Brendan Devereaux. We're here on behalf of the Ham companies, and Mary's done a nice job with this. We've been working at this for over 6 months now. I do want to distinguish this from a typical CUP process. A couple of you have been through this with Eudora Quarry. We went through it in 2020, again in 2022. We don't wish to bring that trauma back. This is very much more of an administrative process. The CUP called for us, among its 23 conditions, to review it periodically. It's a dynamic area, and I wouldn't say it's a living document, but it contemplated that we would come back. And as the mining progressed, as we work through the different range of variables that we have to think about when mining, we would come back and update you. So I think of this very much as an administrative step to update you about the plan. And as Mary noted, we need to adjust the mining sequences. I think the crux of this is that you can look at that exhibit. Phase one is really irregularly shaped. We have a electricity line running through the northern part of the site. We have to mine around that, which causes some complexities. We have multiple mining sites. And as Mary noted, we have to reclaim as we go. So as we're kind of completing these mining areas and planning for future reclamation, we just have these competing interests. And one of them is to continue to offer all the products that we like to offer to the community. But in this case, we cannot reclaim until we move around a little bit. We just need a little more space. And as Mary noted, we're not changing any of the 23 conditions to the CUP. And so we see this as, Mary's described it as a site planning process, but it just requires county commission approval. I'll note that on that exhibit, phase one looks really big. But as you can see, we've outlined a previous portion of phase one that's 25 acres, some inactive portions of phase one. That's not fairly described as active mining areas right now. I would also note that we are trying to do this process right. We've been at this for a little while now with the planning staff. We did hold a town hall in Eudora. We invited all the neighbors. We had a constructive discussion at that event at Eudora High School. We also set out 2 sets of notices. So I think everybody's been given plenty of opportunity to look at this and be aware of what your action is tonight. I'll let Brendan speak, and then obviously we can answer any questions.
All right, good evening. And just again, Brendan Devereaux, Vice President with HAM. My responsibility is the quarry division. So real quick, I'm going to talk a little bit about the application, but Pat and Mary covered most of it. So I just want to do a quick overview of what I'll call how we work, what we do, and then how we try to act as a corporate citizen, and a little bit in a general sense, and then more specifically to the Eudora Quarry. So how we work, what happens in a quarry. So the number one priority for us is always safety. We're in a heavily regulated industry. We're governed by MSHA, the Mine Safety and Health Administration. They do 2 annual inspections. They can do more if there's a hazard complaint or if there ever was an injury. But our motto is to be beyond compliance. We are not trying to just meet their standards. We're trying to go above and beyond all the time. So to start a quarry, you have to get a CUP, then we remove the overburden, we drill and blast the limestone, we haul it to a crusher, we crush it, screen it, size it, stack it, and then we load it and weigh it out for different uses. This specific quarry employs 12 people full-time. We'll often have 4 or 5 other people in there when we're doing overburden removal. That number will get as high as about 18, and then indirectly with all the truck drivers and contractors that we supply, there's hundreds of additional employees that are, or people that are employed because of this quarry. So what do? As Pat mentioned, we like to make a full arrangement of construction aggregate products. The most common ones are for use in ready mix concrete, hot mix asphalt, and drainage material, sub-base material under buildings, and pipe bedding that you'll see when new water lines going in. It'll be aggregate will be laid on top of it, and an assortment of other uses. But some projects you all may be familiar with. We were very involved supplying material 2 years ago to all the improvements on the east end of 23rd Street. We're currently supplying some material to the K10 SLT expansion on the west side of town. A lot of material going to the Dillons on what I'll call West Campus or Iowa and 23rd. And then last year, we not only supplied a lot of aggregate after the fact, but we took a lot of the waste from the KU football stadium project as well. So those are kind of some high-level highlights. And then any asphalt that's being produced in Lawrence likely has some of our material in it, and both of the ready-mix concrete suppliers in town use our material as well. Quickly, just on the corporate citizen piece, as you all are aware, we pay a royalty for road maintenance improvements, but I think over the years we've worked really well with county staff and engineer when things have arisen. We did pave that first mile, or the county paved, and we certainly had constructive discussions with the county staff when that was going on. Pat mentioned the town halls. We do now for every application we have, whether it's a new CUP, a renewal, or something like this. We do voluntary town halls. We also go outside our notification limits and really try to include anybody that could or might be affected by it. We like a nice open process. We understand that people are often interested in our applications, so that's what we try to do. Pat also mentioned reclamation. I would just note every year the state of Kansas gives out the governor's award for reclamation. We did receive it this year in 2025 for a reclamation project we completed in Pottawatomie County. And then more specific to Eudora, it's really been a community that we've worked hard to participate in over the last 10 years. So forgive me for staring at my paper, but I want to read this list correctly. In 2017, it was good to see Aaron here. We actually partnered with CFS Engineers to donate asphalt and construction services to repave the Blue Jacket Trail just north of the school buildings there. There was originally some KDOT grant funding that fell through, and we worked with the city manager and assistant city manager at the time to get that done. After that, I actually served on the Eudora Parks and Rec Foundation board from 2017 to 2018. We helped that same board organize a fundraising golf tournament in 2018. And then most importantly, we've done a lot with Eudora schools. We often have hosted the 5th grade for a tour. The highlight of that is we hold an assembly first before the tour, and I always ask a trivia question at the end, and whichever student answers first actually gets to fire a blast, which if you want to have a good day, go watch a 10 or 11-year-old fire a blast. It's pretty cool. We partnered to build the Outdoor Fitness and Wellness Center at Eudora Middle School in 2018. We've participated in mock student interviews. Mike Curry, a colleague of mine at the time, was principal for a day at Eudora Elementary in 2018. I participated in the same program at Eudora Middle School in 2023. We participated in the school's foundation strategic planning process. 2018 has been a common year. They actually named us their outstanding cardinal partner that year. And then we've been the title sponsor of Eudora Schools Foundation Golf Tournament for 8 years. And when we do it again in October, it'll be 9. So I think that gives you a pretty good idea how we feel about, our involvement in the Eudora community. Now I'll just touch on one quick application item. As both Mary and Pat described, and in the planning staff's report, it mentions the sales of certain types of aggregates. So when you think about the limestone out there, there's technically 6, but we'll ignore the top layer. It's very thin. There's not a lot of it. So let's say there's 5 layers of limestone. We'll call the one closest to the surface 1, the one furthest 5. So 1 and 2 and 4 and 5 can pretty much be used for all uses. 3 cannot. It has a very narrow set of uses. And the demand for what 1, 2, 4, and 5, mostly ready-mix concrete and asphalt material, has outpaced our ability to move 3 as quickly as we would like. It is a deep pit. We're about 165 feet from, the virgin ground is not completely the same elevation, so that varies some. But so we do need to open up fairly large areas just for safety, making sure that our people, equipment, customers, any visitors coming in are operating in a safe environment. So that's really the main reason. If all the limestone was of the same characteristics and could be used all the same way, our phasing would probably look a little bit different. So that's all I have for tonight. And, Pat and I will certainly stand for any questions y'all have. Thank you.
You mentioned royalty for road maintenance. Would you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I don't know if you have it, Pat. I don't have the exact number because it's somewhere around it's 14 point some odd cents. I believe it started at 10 and has been indexed to inflation since I think the 2013 approval. And so for every ton we sell, let's just say it's 14.5 cents for argument's sake. We're paying the county that amount for every ton of material that we sell. And then that's used to maintain 1200 Road. That's the route from Church Street into the quarry. And there's about 1 3/4 miles from Church Street into our gate. The first mile was paved 3 years ago, I believe. And then that last 3/4 mile is still limestone.
Okay, so it was paved 3 years ago and hasn't been repaved? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yeah, and it's the county's responsibility to manage that. And I would tell you that section of road is in fine condition, the paved area. So there's not a need for construction there at the moment.
Thank you.
You bet.
I might mention that I did take a tour of the quarry with Brandon a couple of Mondays ago. And what amazed me is the extent of the operations and the fact that you can't see anything from any of the surrounding roads. It's totally shielded, and other than an occasional blast, nobody would even know you were there, to my opinion.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate hosting and giving tours. I hope that came through when you were out there. But yeah, I think the issues we deal the most with is blasting and truck traffic. And so the truck traffic, at our town halls, anyone that shows up to our town halls are usually people that come here. I give them my business card. We have a few neighbors that text me, in blasts. It's not blasts. I didn't mean to say that way, but not all the time, but maybe frequently here and there, and then won't hear from them for 6 months. And often there's some neighbors on 2300. We will get an occasional driver that goes up there and they're not supposed to. And what we always do is we tell them, listen, one, calling the sheriff is probably the most effective route because I can't actually do anything about the truck. We do post, we do remind, but I always tell people if they can identify the truck or at least the company, we don't have any problem talking to people that haul from us, whether it's someone hauling for us or a customer, that they need to get their act together because we understand that what we do is dependent on following the rules. And so I always take that very seriously. And again, there's probably 100 people in Douglas County that don't work at our company that have my cell phone number and can get a hold of me at any time.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to say, I believe I was on the Planning Commission for probably the last 2 CUPs that came through for this quarry. I did have a tour at that time and had, conversations at that time with the public and the applicant. All of that would be in the record from the Planning Commission minutes at that time.
Other questions, commissioners? Okay, we'll open it up for public comment. Anyone here at the courthouse like to provide public comment on this item? Anyone online, Sarah? All right, commissioners. We'll close public comment and it's up to us.
This might be a question for Sarah. I know we did have a comment in our packet about the road fee and the road condition and such, and that's always kind of an ongoing conversation around this area. In my opinion, that would be appropriate for a CUP conversation. The site plan conversation doesn't really get into that, but can you address, I believe they're up to date with all of those fee payments.
Yes, they are.
Okay, thank you.
There's no other conversation. I'll make a motion to approve a site plan for revising the phases of the Ham Eudora Quarry located at 1232 East 2300 Road.
I second.
Ooh, blinding seconds.
Double second.
We'll let Commissioner Dorsey have that second, Commissioner Reed. Moved and seconded. Any further conversation? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary. Move on to the fourth item on our agenda this evening, which is Alternative 911 Emergency Response Update from ECC and Bert Nash.
Good evening, Board. Thank you for the opportunity to highlight our work. I'm Ryan Storch, Crisis Services Senior Director with Bert Nash.
Ryan, bring that microphone nice and close to you.
Oh,
I'm having
thank
a
you.
hard time hearing you. Yeah.
Hi, Commissioners. I'm Sonia Baeza. I'm Deputy Director for Douglas County Emergency Communications. So we're here tonight to give you an update on the alternative 911 response specific to MRT, the mobile response team with Bert Nash. We wanted to start with our guiding statements. Everything that we did through the GPL process was about these guidance statements to make sure that everything we do is coordinated, trusted.
GPL stands for?
The Government Performance Lab for the Harvard Kennedy School. Thank you. So all the partners came to the table to determine that we wanted a system here in Douglas County that was coordinated, trusted, and client-centered. So everything that we do, every new process that we put into place, we make sure that we're always going back to that vision. And just to update everybody on a timeline, back in July of 2024 is when we started to deploy the MRT out into the field. We started with the Lawrence Police Department. So we took requests from LPD to have MRT come out and meet with somebody that they were called out for. So the whole goal is that people are calling for a problem that maybe law enforcement is not the best fit to solve. And then law enforcement would identify this is a good fit for MRT and we deploy them out to the field. That also allowed us to expand services by not only by MRT being able to be deployed by more than just headquarters or through 988 or direct through Bert Nash. Then in October, we involved other law enforcement agencies that included Baldwin, Eudora, and the Sheriff's Office. So they were given the same process that we use with LPD they were able to contact dispatch to deploy MRT out into the field if that was a need. That's also when we worked with headquarters to have them shift referrals for MRT through dispatch. So they were able to identify if this was a more routine referral or an urgent or immediate referral that needed a more immediate MRT response. So when that was the case, they would contact us at the ECC and we'd deploy MRT. And then in November, we met with LDCFM and the fire, county, and EMS agencies to let them know about the MRT team, what their options were, how they could deploy them out into the field, and just try to start build relationships there to get the word out countywide and all the agencies that we serve. We also worked with KUPD so that the way they'd know that this was a resource that could go on to campus. And then in January of this year, we started doing direct referrals to MRT for people who called dispatch either non-emergency or through 911. A lot of those were specific requests for MRT as we build the program to have protocols in place for triage and assessment. Then in March, very exciting, hopefully you saw the photos on social media, MRT was equipped with radios. It's already been a huge success in just a couple of weeks. They're already communicating on the radio. On Monday, we had MRT responding to a call. Officers were on a situation that might have become violent. So we had told MRT to stage, but the officer then quickly came on the radio and said, no, they can come on in. And it's just allowed us to start streamlining communications.
Thank you, Sonia. Just want to quickly acknowledge the amount of collaboration that it's taken to make this happen over time, from HQ, from the county, from first responders, and just the iteration that's occurred. So when comparing 2023 to 2024, there's really been pretty exponential growth in the deployment of the mobile response team at a rate of about 80% of an increase. Notably, the point in time that Sonia referenced, mid-July, is really when you'll see an uptick. When you look at when we started getting referrals, and that's largely because we've expanded how people can access us. So 988, Douglas County Crisis Line, non-emergent, 911, all of those lead to the ability to deploy the mobile response team in lieu of one or the other in isolation. In this 1,272 total contacts is just to reference that all of the times that we deploy, there's also post-vention efforts. So beyond the initial crisis response, we're going to do a human compassionate contact within 3 days and within 14 days following that initial check-in, see how people are doing, and making sure that if they need more support, that, sometimes we redeploy based on those situations. So that trend has continued in 2025, where we're currently on pace to surpass 800 referrals for the year. Wanted to pause. That was a lot of information quickly for comment or questions. Good. Thank you. So who are we responding to? And this is really showing kind of the unique individuals, which tells a story of recidivism. So I just acknowledged there were 743 deployments last year to 327 individuals, which shows that we are often deploying more than once to the same individuals, and there's a range there. These individuals are often underinsured or non-insured. And then I also provided the time of how long it's taking us to get there. As we've had an increase in referral volume, at the same time we had a decrease in staff, it has increased our response time a little bit. But the coordinated effort and the ability to sort of seamlessly in real time, you think of a situation where we respond and a client reports that they or a loved one overdosed on medications, in real time, we can get on the radio and Sonia's team has medic on the way without us having to make a phone call, which all of that saves lives. Let me see.
And so Ryan, as those changes have come online that we're dispatching through ECC and 911, so presumably the 2025 response times as those come in would be considerably shorter.
You know, I think it depends on a multitude of variables.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of it has to do with how much crisis is happening in Douglas County at any given time. What does staffing look like? And to a certain degree, just balancing the competing demands of can't be at multiple places at once.
So a single team, and then what hours are they actually being deployed?
Sure. So currently it's 8 a.m. to 2 a.m., 365 days a year.
I had a question about the size of the MRT team and the composition. What kind of skills do they have?
Yeah, great question. So we have a team currently of about 7 or 8 full-time staff, a PRN pool as well to ensure operations and also as a way to give my team a break for some work-life balance because much like other first responders and 24/7, the burnout potential is there. And so we want to make sure and try to have options for folks to unplug. We have a varied team of clinicians, case managers, and peer support. And that's really been identified as a best practice in Kansas, depending on the time of the day and the resources. And there's a triage process where our clinical team is determining, based on the risk factors, the presenting problem, what group of individuals and what resources do we have. And a lot of that is also extending trust. And this is why we decided to do a joint presentation, is because this work has been so integrated together. We're also extending trust to the ECC and to HQ and our referral sources on gathering that information on risk factors in the hopes that we can move quickly. Part of that response time is because we have to triage a chart, identify risk factors, and to a certain degree, feel comfortable sending civilians into that situation.
Another question I had is, are most of your calls within the city of Lawrence, or do you also get out into Eudora and Baldwin?
I'm going to let Sonia take this one.
So that was one thing I wanted to highlight on response time because those numbers don't tell the full story. At the end of 2024 is when we started deploying out of the city of Lawrence. So that's going to increase response time. And then not only that, we've had instances where there may be 2 to 3 requests for MRT, and there may only be 1 team that can deploy at the time. So that will affect response time when you just look at that raw data. And so they are responding out into the county. They've responded out to Baldwin. There's a county address in particular that's the far south part of the county that they've responded to. So that's going to affect response time.
One other question due to my lack of knowledge. Do you ever run into a situation where the MRT responds and then you make a decision that that person needs to go to the TRC?
Oh, absolutely. Many days of the week.
And then how do they get there? Do you transport them?
So it would depend on the risk factors in that situation. If it's appropriate for a 2-person civilian team to give a ride, we're going to do that. Part of the beauty of this integration is if we need LEO to transport. And as a reminder on that metric, law enforcement average drop-off time at TRC is 7 minutes. So that is common knowledge at roll call. That's a conversation topic within the PD. And that's excellent marketing. And the more folks are aware of that, the more law enforcement we see continuing to show up and drop people off.
Are you
Sorry, are you tracking any cost of care savings, like ED diversion?
Absolutely. So we recently did a CIT Council presentation in February. Sandra Dixon provided us from LMHED with a lot of data, and it's substantial. Not only LMHED, but also Douglas County Jail. I want to say it was 30-something% reduction of bookings of primarily SPMI, behavioral health care, SUD presentations. So we know that the impact is significant. And again, this is within year 1 and 2 of these programs being online. So we're still doing a lot of the data tracking and analysis, kind of like the timeline illustrates. There's a lot of real-time iteration and pivoting. And certainly one of the values is not assuming where we started is what makes sense to do tomorrow.
So then as we move forward, knowing that we're going to have some change in leadership at Lawrence Memorial Hospital, so do we think that there might be opportunities to, as we look at the cost savings that LMH is seeing, bringing them on maybe as a funding partner for the underinsured population that may have been using the emergency department?
I certainly think that Burt Nash leadership would be open and encouraging of that. The reality is so much of our crisis services that we provide are for uninsured populations without payer sources. And the passion and that my teams, I mean, the Do Not Reject facility that the TRC is and represents is really unlike any other crisis intervention center in Kansas. A lot of crisis centers being built aspire to that threshold. The TRC's been doing it. And really that's a testament to the leadership of the TRC, the medical director, our nursing director, and trying to get individuals bought in on a value system of serving everybody when so many people come from these models where exclusion criteria are part of it. I mean, every hospital, Osawatomie State Hospital is the very top of the hierarchy. They have exclusionary criteria if you have medical comorbidities, IDD. So what I can say is it was exciting enough that it attracted me out here to be a part of it.
And for the insured and the underinsured population, bringing the payers to the table as well to partner and looking at a funding model?
Yes, and Medicaid is really the primary one that does. Some of the private sector insurance companies do not reimburse for these services. And so my crisis teams aren't necessarily generating lots of revenue for Burt Nash as an organization. We are, however, saving lives, and it's part of the public service mindset and sort of nudge and trying to move the needle towards more similar to, law enforcement doesn't charge for someone calling 911 either, and not suggesting we're first responders, but we're trying to adopt similar value systems and really looking the best fit on our team are those folks that also have that core belief.
And agree they may not currently reimburse, but looking at risk-based agreements and or HOP pilots to engage them, healthy opportunity pilots?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, being present in someone's difficult moments in crisis is an honor for us. And, quick shout out to all of the community partners that play a role in supporting those in crisis. We can also further reduce harm and sort of stop that snowball from rolling downhill further. Once we get on site, we're going to triage, we're going to do an assessment, we're going to safety plan, we're going to de-escalate. There's a ton of care coordination that happens within sort of the broader crisis continuum, but then also more locally within Burt Nash, like the example you mentioned of, maybe it started with an LEO contact, the mobile team deployed, determined TRC was appropriate. So really there's a lot of information sharing in real time that allows us to divert from the EDs, from the jail, and that's where that cost savings, it's more a model of where people aren't than that we're billing a lot. And then the documentation.
We also just wanted to speak to some of the positive feedback that we've gotten from the first responders. We meet weekly with LPD, ECC, myself, and MRT, and we discuss cases. How are things going? How can we do things better? And all of the reports from patrol have been that they're so grateful that MRT is online. They can access them quickly and easily. They have quick response times, even though if you look at the data, it might seem long. It's not a couple of minutes or under 5 minutes, but it's quick enough. It's getting them something out to the field that is going to give the person the potential to receive the right help that they need. So it's been having a very positive impact and on the individuals, but also on the people that are doing the work. So officers who go out and maybe don't have the tools available to help this person, but now they have someone they can call to do that. And so it's been really great in that aspect. They can do warm handoffs. Even just the other day, an officer responded to a call. They didn't need to remain on scene, so they cleared. They weren't available to respond to another call, but they just sat outside and waited until MRT showed up, and they can give that warm handoff. But if an emergency came up, they could have left and it would have been fine. Everybody knows where the team is at. The availability has been great because they are on duty until 2 in the morning. Some of our busiest times of days are after dinner time, 8 p.m. You know, you have those late night hours where people start calling 911 for more severe type reasons. And so just having them available for those expanded hours has been helpful. And then all the joint coordination response that we've been able to see and collaborate on. We've had individual cases where Mobile Integrated Health with LDCFM was able to work with MRT to do some care coordination because the person had some medical conditions as well as behavioral health conditions, and they were able to partner together and help that individual. And that doesn't only just help that person, but it helps those teams because these are individual teams that are out alone working in the field. I think you guys talked about this in your work session. You know, we have one MRT, we have one MIH, but when they can partner together and they can have partners out in the field, and it doesn't feel like such a heavy lift to do it on their own, that's a huge impact. And then having the radios, hearing MRT is going out to a call on the radio. We had LDCFM medics request MRT just because they were used to seeing them respond in the middle of the night to certain calls. So it's been really great to see that just grow organically and, you know, see the possibilities that might come out of it.
Sonia, can I ask a follow-up to those comments? When you're talking to law enforcement or you're talking to LDCFM, do you feel like MRT is lowering the workload and the work expectations for those groups?
Definitely, yes. And I know they're excited for what the future might be, right? They're excited for that day where we answer a 911 call for someone who's suicidal but nonviolent, and the solution is to deploy MRT if there's no safety concerns, right? They want to be there, they want to be a partner, but if they can give that to those who are trained to do that work, then they can do other things that they need to do, respond to emergencies. It's very exciting, yeah.
Thanks.
So lessons learned. So, you know, this is just some of our nuggets and takeaways of this partnership as we've worked together and really the broader crisis continuum system. But one of them is the importance of pre-teaching expectations, certainly for our staff and recruitment. That's been true. Also for the community more broadly in terms of what types of response. So I'll share a couple of examples here. So we created an informed consent equivalent type form to really pre-teach, if you're applying for one of these crisis positions on the mobile team, at the point of phone screen, at the point of interview, we're going to talk about the inherent risk associated with the work. There will be incidents where individuals are cursing at you. There will be incidents where you're going to see nudity. There will be incidents, and this applies to the TRC certainly as well. And part of it is inherent to treating individuals in intoxication and florid psychosis. So we found that the more that we have those upfront pre-teaching conversations, the more prepared people feel. And in some cases, people have said, this isn't a fit for me. And that's okay. We would rather individuals identify that at the point of interview than once they're in the role and doing the training. On the community side, at times there's been expectations that law enforcement never respond. Or I can think of an example where one of the referrals, the report that we got was that the child in the home was lighting the house on fire in multiple spots, and the family was very upset that the mobile team didn't come and a fire truck showed up. We also have the ethical duty and obligation to ensure safety. And so we work closely with Sonia, and I know that and Tony and the ECC more broadly. And I know you talk about offering options. I don't know if you want to.
So not necessarily offering options, but just having options available. And when people call, they don't always know what they need, but they know what their problem is. So, engaging our staff and helping them learn and understand what resources are available and having an option. So if you get that person who calls and says, I need this help, but I really don't want a police officer to come out here. We're in a community where we can say, well, we have the mobile response team that can come and try to help you with your problem. So having options, we can transfer people to 988. We can transfer people who don't even have cell phone service to 988 if they need to just talk to someone on the phone. That's huge. I don't think that's talked about enough. You don't have to pay for cell phone service to call 911, and now 911 can transfer you to 988. So we have so many more options than we ever had. We have people that may call 911 numerous times because they just want to talk to someone on the phone. So we have something that we can do to help them.
Thank you, Sonia. We talk and have values-based conversations with my teams in crisis care a lot about the inherent risk of inaction and what happens if we don't deploy quickly. And really just trying to continue to ingrain a public servant mindset. The intersection of behavioral health care and law enforcement is something I've been passionate about for my entire career. I have the privilege currently to be on the co-chair of the CIT Council, and the intersection of law enforcement and mental health is where so many people get help. So just continuing to advocate in that space, removing barriers to care, no wrong door access points. And an example of that would be 988, Douglas County Crisis Line, non-emergent, 911. They're all gonna get you to the ability to deploy the mobile team.
That recurrent collaboration that we talked about, we meet every week. That doesn't necessarily mean we have something of value to talk about every week, but sometimes that just opens up opportunities to talk about other things and discover how this system can grow. So, recently we learned that they're doing critical incident stress management training and how maybe that can help our first responder community. Maybe MRT could be deployed to come out when there's a critical incident. Or I know we've talked in the past, if there's a fire at a house and that family needs some type of care or support, they can respond to that. A fatality accident, they can respond. It's not your traditional behavioral health crisis, but those are real crises that happen all the time. So just leaning into that constant communication, collaboration, working together, learning more about each other, and helping us develop stronger partnerships.
data-driven performance management is one of our values and metrics. We're constantly reviewing data and just sort of a continual iteration and growth. We have one more slide, but wanted to pause again for questions or comments. Okay. So opportunities ahead, and Sonia set this one up well. Yeah. So, clients and callers define the crisis. We don't play a role in defining or judging what a crisis is or is not. So part of my message today would be to go ahead and to heighten awareness that those situations like Sonia described, a house fire, a traffic accident, and there's a family member who witnesses secondary trauma. We think of people being the recipient of trauma and crisis, but if you observe someone in crisis, that would be an appropriate referral today to the mobile response team. Now, it's important that they get outfitted with some training to really have an evidence-based approach to that post-tension. And that's what the intention of the critical incident stress management training that they're doing is in.
And that psychoeducation piece, that can also tie back into your work session, that individual that was calling the senior center over and over again. That's something that we deal with in 911, and that can be very taxing. It can cause burnout, compassion fatigue. We were discussing that at one of our meetings, and they talked about MRT volunteered. We can do some psychoeducation with your staff, help them understand why people engage in these behaviors, and just being able to utilize those resources to keep all of our responders healthy and continuing to do the work. And Ryan keeps saying that they're not first responders, but they are. They actually are now, and they will be. They'll continue to be. So, being a part of that team and also helping the team, heightening awareness, letting people know, what things they might face, what crises they might have to deal with, and how can we work through it in a proactive and productive way.
So just a little bit more about what's ahead. We've already talked about the radios. We have an alert media app that we're using at Burt Nash and on the mobile team, which is just another panic button built into an application. And it allows for things like if you're walking into a house that you don't know the individuals, you can set it up and say, 30 minutes from now, notify the ECC, just sort of it leaves cookie crumb trails. So just continuing to be mindful of the safety of sending civilians into these situations and trying to keep everybody safe. And I'd like to underscore the comfort I feel and my leaders feel with these radios, knowing that geolocation are a part of them. Our leaders don't see where the mobile response team is at, but more importantly, the ECC can see on their board where they're at, much like law enforcement, and just the comfort of knowing that there's eyes on these individuals. And the field has been a tremendous benefit to my ability to sleep. I think that's, yeah. What questions or comments do you guys have?
A couple of the pieces that I've been really excited to watch as this has evolved. First, getting radios so that there's so that they're part of a team. I mean, a broader team, and can easily access their own safety needs as well as for clients. And that piece you started talking about addressing like the secondary trauma for families that are experiencing something that was a 911 call. So that's something I've personally experienced and looked for and wanted a solution for, families. If we, if there was a call for service for one family member, that family member gets transported, who talks to the rest of the family to help process that? And I think, being willing to go into those situations and be on call for that is really meaningful to me.
You didn't talk about it much, but the last document you have in our packet shows community response to your to MRT's and the reactions of that, did it meet your needs? I mean, it's very high that it was very good or good. And I just want to take a second to highlight that because I think what we're trying to make sure is that the people who are getting the services are happy with the services that they're getting. So just thank you for that. I do have a question maybe for Sarah or Bob, and that is around budget and where the budget dollars come, maybe to just sort of remind us how much it is and where those dollars come from.
So the county provides subsidy. It's a part of a braid. The state provides funding for MRT. Also, that funding is declining. So currently it's $445,000 to support the mobile response team 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. all in the mental health sales tax.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a public, this is a general business item, so we'll open it up for public comment. Would anyone here like to provide public comment on this item? Anyone online, Sarah?
No.
I'll have a few more questions, so don't go too far.
Oh.
Thank you. What vehicle are they using for this response?
We have a Nissan Armada, which is great because it does well in the snow. And then we have an older Dodge Caravan. So we have two.
And where are people deploying from for MRT?
200 Main, typically, right? The main Burt Nash building.
What kinds of things are they doing when they're not deployed? Is there still client-based care that is related to MRT, or are they doing other things?
Yes. So this mobile team also has additional duties, part of which were absorbed following the decision not to have a co-responder. So we're doing a lot of LKPD follow-ups and really sort of meeting those follow-up needs for the PD in the absence of a formal co-responder position. We have a contract with Douglas County Jail, and we're doing jail assessments and jail screens. We've recently created a partnership with Health Source Integrated Solutions in Topeka, and they're helping to do that on our behalf at times as well. And then we're also doing the PASSAR screens, which are the nursing home assessments for individuals that are both deemed severe persistent mental illness. There's a medical and a psychiatric component. And then there's also sort of a hodgepodge of internal referrals that we get. There was one that I supported the team on today. I should more accurately say they supported and I hung out. But where, if at the TRC in the parking lot or someone at 200 Main, someone walking around Lawrence Memorial Hospital who appears to not be doing well, it's the team that internally gets called by all the other Burt Nash teams and says, hey, come help with this.
So these 7 or 8 people, they have these other duties also that also have funding streams. So the county portion that's supporting the MRT, so how does that funding work? When are they responding through MRT and coming under the county and state funding for that versus some of these other activities?
So I would say 80-90% of their time is spent either deploying and responding in conjunction with the post-crisis intervention follow-up. So there's also the follow-up care with some case management that happens after the initial deployment. The other responsibilities are not a large time component for the most part. So really we're doing that to meet the community need. It's also helping to, in some cases, divert individuals out of the jail if the jail doesn't have a reason to hold on to them. So I would argue that is benefiting the county as well.
You mentioned co-response, and just can you give the brief timeline of when that happened and when it went away? Because that was a mental health professional co-responding with Lawrence Police Department, and that operated for some time, but we don't have that now.
That's correct. From memory, I want to say maybe that was May of 24.
Bob, do you have more?
What I would say is that really for probably at least 2 years, turnover in that position or in the officer position created just a lot of churn and lack of availability of a co-responder team. And then the city decided no longer to continue to support the co-responder position. Patrick, was it May of 24? Yeah. So there were conversations that were going back and forth and there was still support happening, but the co-responder program does not exist at the moment.
And I would add to that as the other crisis continuum has become more robust with the TRC and MRT, the feedback that I've got from PD is they don't feel like they need that co-responder role as much, and not suggesting that it wouldn't be beneficial, but just that with the TRC being open and operational and the mobile team getting busier, I think we've been able to effectively meet those needs.
I also feel obligated to say this, Ryan. That's really nice. I'd like to send them a bill in terms of that, because the TRC is the responsibility of Bert Nash, the state and the county.
I agree with that. I just also want to, there's another component that is being deployed, not necessarily by ECC. So Lawrence Police have a contract, the city has a contract with Heartland Radac for a peer first responder that's deployed from the homeless response team. So when a law enforcement officer encounters a person who needs help, but might not need the intensity of a mobile response team or doesn't want anything to do with the system, the homeless response team can deploy a peer to try to build engagement and rapport. And that's another path or an avenue to connect to this kind of ever bolstered safety net and system of care. So that's kind of wrapped around this, but it's new.
And Bob, before you go, and that is funded by Lawrence Police Department, or is that through?
City of Lawrence has a contract as part of the homeless response team with Heartland Radac.
Thanks.
And that's actually being funded right now through Kansas Fights Addiction Alcohol Fund. So there are a number of funding sources that are being put into place to try to build these components.
Before I give up my mic and turn it back to others, I really do appreciate the last 3 pages with the data sets there that are in the packet. I recognize that the deployment kind of started with Lawrence PD and is expanding out into the county through other agencies. And I know we have some other zip codes that aren't listed here that occur in the county and probably just lower populations, maybe haven't had calls yet. So I'll just be really curious to kind of watch that data unfold. Mirror Commissioner Kelly's comments that like the high ratings are also really important of how people are assessing the care that they're getting through here. So thank you for all the data. Very fun.
So this is not an action item unless commissioners have other comments they want to make.
Just have one quick comment, which is to say that I really appreciate this update and frankly, I'm impressed with the evolution of progress and the positive feedback, because this is an example of we envisioned it one way, started it one way, had to do some pivoting, reworking, calibrating who all needed to be involved in that in the most efficient way to increase the utilization and the success of it. And so I'm just really appreciative of that and all the dedicated work that I know it took to kind of unpack what wasn't quite working right and what we needed to do to pivot and make sure that we were maximizing the usage of this and thinking about safety across the board, to much of Sonia's point about both the responders and the individuals in the community that we're trying to serve. So thanks for the overview and thanks for all that dedicated work.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time. We'll move on to our last agenda item, which is a presentation from Lawrence Douglas County Fire and Medical.
Commissioner Kelly, could I bother you for a brief break?
Yes.
I'm really sorry. I know you all just started to walk up here. I mean, like a 3-minute break and I will be ready to roll.
Yes,
Thank
we'll take
you.
a three,
Five. Let's do
5-minute break. 5 minutes. We'll be
Apologize.
back at 7:11. All right, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for that quick break. I see our friends from LDCFM are here.
Really appreciate Chief Hardy and Mackenzie Etzel being here to, and this conversation has pivoted a bit. So I think this team's ready to update you and answer some questions that you all might have. So take it away.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Joe Hardy. I'm an acting fire chief of the LDCFM. My crew, my team, Mackenzie Ezell, interim chief of staff, acting deputy chief Tyler Wade, and division chief John Darling of the EMS division. So we put a lot of work into this presentation. I know you guys have a copy of it. We're going to go through it quickly, but we are going to give some time at the end to answer questions and talk about some important stuff here at the end. So I appreciate your time.
Hello, Mackenzie Ezell, interim chief of staff with Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical. So originally when we were going to do this presentation, we were like, let's just talk data. Obviously things have happened in the last month. And so we want to leave, like Chief Hardy said, lots of time at the very end to get questions from you, hopefully supply some responses and answers. But then we're going to be noting all of those questions and hoping to come back next month with specifics, whether it's direction or play this out and see what this looks like. But as you guys know with data, it's really hard to get very fine-tuned if we don't have specific direction or thoughts of intent. So real quick, LDCFM guiding documents is something that we put in almost every presentation. You can't see it, so let me. Yes. Okay, what am I missing here? Oh, there. Oh my goodness. Promise this is not the first time I've used Zoom. I've just transitioned out of Zoom for a little while. All right. These are our guiding documents. What we do in the next few years should be in here. And so all of this conversation about data, we can either look back at the beginnings of some of these documents and see the direction that it's pointed us and the conversations that we've had. But then the intent is to also be able to pivot and look at what's going on demand-wise within LDCFM jurisdiction, and then also other factors. So again, we have 5 fire medical stations in the city of Lawrence. We have 2 medical stations in Douglas County. We have these maps in almost every presentation as well. And the green is the blanket of the standards of cover, our response time, where one on the left, you can see from all of the city of Lawrence fire medical stations, this is where our unit should be able to reach within a 4-minute drive time, which is our benchmark. We're going to talk about benchmarks later in the presentation. And then on the right, you can see Douglas County, and that's a 10-minute drive time. Our total incident count, this is just the updated numbers for 2024. It's the same that you guys saw in the last presentation that we gave to you back in January. And then the real reason originally that we wanted to come before you guys and have this presentation was just to talk data, to remind you that when we're coming up with either different initiatives or asks, or even just the conversations, that's prompted by what we're seeing in the data, what we're seeing from those reports, and things that have been highlighted to analyze at a deeper level. And so we do look at what we're able to do, our capabilities in that top left corner, like I just mentioned, with that standards of cover. We look at things like a total response time, other data sets, disadvantaged populations, and then another way to look at demand. So we look at 2 main data sets typically when we're talking about LDCFM data. One of those is the incident count. The other is the response performance. When we're talking about response performance, we are looking at only emergent events. When we're talking about count, we're talking about every call that LDCFM gets dispatched to. So what we can do with those two data sets is layer them into community data, and we can dial it into response zones and districts. So this is a fine example where we can look at community data, and specifically this is our zone 5, and we can see some demographics. And if we see something that is worth investigating even more, this just shows that we have the information beyond just LDCFM resources to dig in to see what risk is there. So talking about risk, when we talk about the calls that LDCFM responds to, we classify the risks and then we categorize them. So a fire might, like a fire at like a small grass fire is not the same as a commercial structure fire. So what we do is we go through all of our call natures that we could be dispatched to from the Douglas County Emergency Communication Center. And we identify the probability, the consequence that that call would have, and then also the impact to LDCFM resources. And that gets graded. There's this whole scoring matrix. And then we categorize what level of risk that is, so that when we're talking about, in the past, we've talked about cardiac arrest. A cardiac arrest risk is a lot higher than a stub toe. And so we want to be able to separate those things to say, how are we doing on these life or death situations versus someone just needs some help and we're able to get resources there. So within each of these call natures that we are dispatched to, that we've identified a level of priority and risk to, we also do our effective response force critical tasking. So for a structure fire, we need X amount of people, we need X amount of resources to be on scene to be able to mitigate that risk. Very different than a stub toe. So same thing with cardiac arrest. We've critical tasked, how do we help this patient to mitigate their risk and to move them on to a hospital? How many people do we need? What type of resources do we need? What level of EMS certification? Vastly different than a headache. And so the effective response force, there's just a few little snippets on the screen. It's very small, so I don't really expect you guys to read them, but just wanted to give you some perspective and also to start the conversation. But the table that we have in the far left is our call deployment. And so one thing that I see on here is let's do like a long fall. And so for a long fall, when dispatch gets a call into the dispatch center and says, oh, there is a long fall, there is a fall. Someone has fallen from a really high spot. What do we need to send? This tells them, hey, send a medic unit, send an engine, quint, or truck, and it tells them kind of here's what fits that.
And then the total that's at the side of that is total number of personnel, not because the other tick marks are what apparatus.
Correct. So right now, if we're sending engine 4 and medic 4, engine 4 has 4 people on that truck. Medic 4 has 2 people, and so 6 people. So if the total says 6 people and it needs, some of these might need multiple medic units, some of them might need an engine or a truck, and that's how we deploy to get that critical task number. So if we need 21 people on scene, we're getting 21 people there somehow, whether we're using 4 fire trucks and a few medic units or the other way around. We're getting the people there.
Mackenzie, later on you talk about EMS calls versus fire calls. And so would you count a long fall as a fire call or as a EMS call?
A long fall, I really hope I get this right, is an EMS call.
That's an EMS call?
Yep.
Okay. How do you make that determination when more of the people that are on the call are related to the quint or the engine than are related to the ambulance?
So we deploy off of the risk related to the actual incident. And so if I could say one could argue, depending on like the fall nature, if we need 6 people there, we can send 3 medic units, or we can send a truck and a medic unit. It depends on like the specific one. Each of these we have defined out. I don't remember the critical tasking for the long fall, but we've done the critical tasking for every call nature that we have. Okay. So that's when we back out to say, how many medic units, how many trucks, how many battalion chiefs, chief officers need to go to this call.
And as those get dispatched, sometimes that you get your initial call nature and then you get a kind of a more updated call nature. So you're within real time kind of responding first based on what that initial call is. And then if it gets changed, do you continue with the same resources that you'd sent or send different ones?
So it depends. So dispatch right now, when they get a call in, police, fire, medical, and if they say medical, it just started this, I don't know if, yeah, ECC's here. So I don't have the exact way down, but they start sending resources to whatever matches the initial complaint once they get the proper information where they can send some resources headed in that direction. So if we came out with someone said, there's a sick person, EMS medic unit starts being sent. If that changes to a grass fire, just based on whatever conversations, those resources would switch in their system. It goes from what's being deployed for this original call nature to now it's different. And so then there has been conversation between our battalion chiefs primarily, or the captains on the responding units, or the officers on the responding units, to say, we don't need to go to this call if there happens to be some issue. So yeah, our resources do change. I would say enough where I've noticed it while being in my office, a decent amount. So resources, we're not just talking medic units and fire trucks, we're talking brush trucks, utilities, boats. However, the medic trucks and the fire trucks are obviously the biggest assets and what we typically talk about, because that's related to our higher call volume risk classifications, fire and EMS. Okay, I am going to go super fast through this. If you guys have questions, we can definitely come back. We do an annual compliance report every single year as a part of our accreditation. Within our annual compliance report, we put in all of our data into these tables. We have 14 of these tables. Earlier, I mentioned how we classify and categorize our incidents. So fire, like a low fire, low hazard fire, moderate hazard fire, high and maximum, same thing for EMS, tech rescue, and hazmat. So each of those different pieces, we have a table for, so that if we see something like maximum, I think this one's maximum or high risk EMS, we can say, how are we doing specifically with the call natures that we're dispatched to that are classified as high risk EMS? Do we have a problem within our dispatching, within our turnout time, or within our first qualified unit response time, just getting someone on scene that's able to stop risk? Or is it the full package? We need 7 people there and we can never get 7 people there. We only get 6 or we only get 5. And then taking a deeper dive into that, saying, are we okay with 5? Are we okay with 6? How has that been looking? Tying that to our outcomes. So we're looking at the inputs as far as like what we have resource-wise, the outputs of how we're getting those resources to the incident to mitigate that risk, and then the outcomes of the survivability, the fires contained to the room of origin, et cetera. So in the top left corner of all these tables, you will see what that classification and category is. On the far left side, you will see how we break out our total response time. So we look at alarm handling time, our turnout time, and our travel time, and then all encompass total response time. And these are for LDCFM units only. To the right, it just goes into more detail of what that actually looks like, or what that is. We classify our information as urban and rural because we have obviously different zones that look very different as far as risks goes. And then we have different benchmarks so that we're able to say, how are we doing in our urban areas versus rural? Instead of clumping it all together and saying, here's our performance, and not being able to dive into those specific zones or districts.
So Mackenzie, in terms of urban districts, that would be Lawrence, Baldwin City, Eudora, but not Lecompton. Lecompton falls as a rural district. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks. So we have 5 planning zones that are urban in the city of Lawrence, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we have Eudora and Baldwin, EC and BC. Within the document, you'll see those labeled that way. And then we have like DG1 through DG5, and then 11 and 12s. Mm-hmm. And then we have our benchmarks. These benchmarks are set by you all and can be influenced by you all. They do come from historic practice and then also quality standards through different organizations like the Center for Public Safety Excellence that helps departments strive for continuous improvement and basically validates and verifies that we are running LDCFM like a business and not just off of gut feel and what we feel like doing.
So I would say, I don't think we've actively set any of these. So maybe that's within our rights, but I don't think have been influencing that at all that I know of. Are they at all related to ISO rating or
NFPA or accreditation? Other stuff, I'll tie it all together. So you're correct. So these were, I don't know when they were originally set, but in all of our community risk assessment standards of cover documents that we've done since I think 2006, have different sections within each of those documents to say what the benchmarks are and how they've been set. And so those have been community driven with representatives from different from different groups. And then this one that we're using right now is from 2021. And I don't believe we made any changes from the 2017. And a lot of those were driven off of NFPA standards. And then also just like quality practice. So there is one thing with this like data set that I will call out. You'll see in some of our tables, we've highlighted some areas of green. This is when we've either met or done better than what our goal was. So when we had the accreditation team come in and audit us, verify and validate everything, this is something where there was a recommendation in one of our big tables. They said, hey, you should look at this. And if this benchmark is either, if you're always meeting it and you're doing really, really well, does that actually equate to your outcomes? Do you want to keep this up? Do you want to increase that and have those conversations? It's been a recommendation to come to you all and have that conversation about benchmarks. Just need to get to it. So always open for discussion about it and also more investigation into what supports the quality standards. So then we have the data set. We look at data within 5 years. We have each column for each of those 5 years, and then we aggregate the data. And so this we can look at trends. One thing that we talk about is the total response time for the first unit on scene. This is an LDCFM unit. This is typically when we're talking about how fast can we get there. The first qualifying unit for any medical calls is going to be any LDCFM unit because all of our units have advanced life support providers. And within our documents, the advanced life support provider is someone that can start mitigating the risk. On the flip side, like for fire, if we have an ambulance show up to a fire call, they are not considered a qualified unit. They cannot stop loss with their medic unit. Another side of things is our total response force. I talked about earlier how many different things and what critical tasks do we need to do to fully mitigate the risk. This is where we look at that picture. So we can dive into the trends that we're seeing with that first responding unit. We typically would see great results in this distribution if we had stations on every single corner. Someone's going to get to your call immediately. If only one person was at each of those stations, we would start to see the impact in this concentration. We need 6 people to get to a call. These 6 people are all coming from different places. So we would see a negative impact in the concentration, but we would get people there really fast. So that's where separating this data out can help us start having those conversations of, is it a deployment resource issue as far as capacity, location, or ability?
Mackenzie, I know I keep asking a lot of questions.
It's okay.
So a year ago, when City of Lawrence was having the conversation about 3 people on a truck versus 4 people on a truck, it wasn't about getting that turnout time, getting that first on scene. It was about getting that full complement of the number of apparatus and the number of personnel that the standards of coverage call for. Is that correct?
So the conversations last year when we were talking about staffing and deployment, we have done the scientific, really dialed into the call natures of if there is a risk, here's how many resources we need on scene. Right now, if that looks like 3 fire trucks and 2 medic units, if we change staffing, that would increase the amount of units that we need to send to that call because we still need to mitigate that risk in a safe way and in the proper way.
And those numbers are kind of informed by the NFPA standards.
For the response. So there is some NFPA standards that drive that. That's where they've done a lot of studies to say scientifically, it is safe, it is effective when you can do it this way. We pair that with how LDCFM responds to units, what resources we have as far as the capabilities of our people, the tools that we have. Are we able to do those same things? So like we may perform vastly different than a department that runs a handful of calls a year, or that runs 10 times the amount of calls that we do a year. And maybe their bread and butter is their high-rise structure fires. They're probably sending a different amount of people to the structure fires, those high-rise structure fires than we are. And so being able to use the standards to inform health safety tactics while also combining the nature of our risk in our community and the resources that we have.
Thanks, that's a help.
Yeah. Okay, those are the data tables. If you guys ever want to read through those, you are more than welcome. I know that I have 10 minutes to stick to my 30-minute time frame. So
that was supposed to include questions, Mackenzie, but
okay,
keep going.
I'll just fly through this real quick and then we can go back if you guys have quick questions or whatever questions. We can take time on those. So when I talked about those rural zones, these are the rural demand zones that we look at. So we're able to pull all of our data and plot them on maps and look at our response performance and look at where those calls end up within Douglas County. And so on the right, you can see the map, and then on the left, this is our rural incidents, or the aggregate, so 2020 to 2024. And this is the travel time for the first unit. So again, EMS calls, all of our units, no matter who gets there first, everybody counts, everybody's a qualified unit. This is a different data set than what I talked about earlier, where we have incident count. So when we're talking about response performance and time, we are only looking at when LDCFM was dispatched to an emergency. We ran with lights and sirens, we drove with lights and sirens, and we got there and it was the emergency that we expected. So none of the, it's a headache, turns out to be a cardiac arrest. This would be, it's a cardiac arrest and we get there and it's a cardiac arrest.
So Mackenzie, I'm trying to understand the data from the earlier chart. Pregnancy is considered an EMS, I'm going to guess. That's an EMS call, but it requires a truck as well, according to the chart that you showed, correct?
If it was on the chart, then yes.
Yes, okay. So you're looking at the total time to these rural districts with both of the, I mean, I understand like one's going to get there first, but both are being sent?
Okay, so not necessarily.
Okay.
So lots of documents. We have a rural, like we have a City of Lawrence document with that call matrix. I'm pretty sure that's the one I had pulled from. And then we have a Douglas County where we know that our partners will be also arriving on scene. So we do have that split out. So every call that would be in the county that we would respond to, technical rescue, EMS, and I think we may have hazmat in there as well, that we separate those out for City of Lawrence and elsewhere.
And when you say the county, you mean the unincorporated area?
I mean, all county. So Baldwin, Eudora, outside of City of Lawrence and Grant Township, where we have fire suppression services that are provided. So we also have the document that we can send you that you can, you can see all of that.
So in short, for like the pregnancy call, in Lawrence, you'd get a medic unit and a truck to get 6 people. In the rural area, you'd get a medic unit and first responders.
Right.
So those 2 data sets that I just talked about, this is a lot to look at. But LDCFM responses by the demand zones, this is something that we can dive into later on if we're really interested in a certain area. We can look at the count, but then we can also look at the response performance associated in those and start identifying trends to see what we want to dig into. So we have that for rural. We also have it for urban. The main point with both of these is that our response time, our emergency response time has increased. This is something that's been consistent with what we've talked about in the past over the last few years. And then this is the same thing for urban. So City of Lawrence and also Baldwin and Eudora.
So on this one, Mackenzie, what I was really struck by was, when you look at the response times for Baldwin and Eudora, it's really not in the same category as the situations inside the city of Lawrence, and it's really not the same as the unincorporated area. And I argued that maybe we need 3 different ways to look at this, because just the number of responses is so dramatically different. And so I think that's something that we need to continue to pull apart when we talk about station or resource optimization.
Yep, I would agree. And this is where we have another recommendation to look at our planning zones. Right now, they just happen to be around all of our stations, and I couldn't tell you how they were actually formed. It was identified by our peer team that came in to say, hey, you have some opportunity here. These planning zones realistically should be used for specific community risk reduction efforts, and to be looking at the risk that's within each of those. A prime example, just to say like what some opportunity would be, is right now, like Mass Street and like the area directly surrounding Mass Street could be its own planning zone because it looks vastly different than the neighborhood next to it. And so saying that what we respond to there may need to be different than elsewhere, or if there needs to be some sort of community risk reduction efforts, it can be specialized in a certain area instead of doing a blanket.
As our transportation network changes, and we have the increased lanes on K10 and then the Wakarusa extended, is that the opportunity to also go back and look at some of these response zones? Do they still make the most sense the way they are, or should they change in response to the changes in transportation?
My opinion is that we need to change our planning response zones. I think that there's a lot of risk, as we can see in our community risk assessment standards of cover, and then also the document that emergency management puts together about risk in the community. And I think that we can be better data informed if we look into the different categories of risk within Douglas County, and then are able to see whether it's like deployment of resources, or if it's, I just think that there's a lot that we can do, a lot of potential that we're not doing right now.
You've mentioned standards related to response, right? 8 minutes. Is that correct? Do I have that right? 8 minutes?
So when I'm talking about like standards for response, there is a whole bunch of different standards for response as we classify it. So for like total response time or for travel time, I know that for travel time in the county, like in rural areas, is 8 minutes for the first unit.
Okay. And so my question is really around, are there standards for the number of trucks per coverage area?
There are recommendations based on research that we can apply to areas like urban areas, rural areas, metro-sized areas, suburban areas. And so there are recommendations, but they are not standards as if you don't do this, whatever will happen. However, it is if, like, this is the standard, this is the recommendation, the best quality practice. If this is not performed, you can expect a decrease in effectiveness in your tactics, impact on health and safety, longer response times, those types of things.
And so what are the recommendations for our area, for the county?
That's where I think we can split our planning zones up better to say, okay, this area is truly what is defined as a rural area, and be able to associate that. I don't have that information right now, but that is something that John is writing down and that we will bring to the next commission meeting, if not before.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Can you talk about this graph and the Baldwin City urban response?
Yes, I'm going to invite John up here to do this.
All right, right on. Yeah, thanks. So the question was with the Baldwin City response, there's a few things to factor in here. One, if we're looking at, this is an urban demand zone. So, okay, so we're looking at just within the city limits of Baldwin. And then what this is travel time for the first LDCFM unit at the 90th percentile. What we mean by that is we're not saying average, because that's a coin toss as to whether or not we get there on time. That's if you had 10,000 calls, you go down to 9,000th and whatever that travel time is, that's what that number would be to make the chart. So if you were looking at calls at the 50th percentile or the 75th percentile, Medic 11 and 12 would definitely bring those numbers down, but we have to be there 90% of the time to make our benchmark. We're probably not going to do that. And I think that's where we're talking about, is it fair to say, compare a smaller incorporated area that doesn't have additional ambulances to within the city of Lawrence, where we do have a number of other ambulances that can also respond and help bring that 90th percentile time down. Does that make sense?
I think.
No, it doesn't.
I'm reading something into it, and you can tell me if I'm right or not. So the Medic 11, which is stationed in Baldwin City, none of our medic units are always at the station. They go on calls. And Medic 11 has a large territory that it covers. And so the time for Medic 11 to respond outside of Baldwin City to the southwest part of the county and then, transport someone to a hospital, like they're gone from Baldwin City a lot longer than maybe even Medic 12 would be from Eudora. Is that the part that we're seeing? Like we're seeing the response times being higher because Medic 11 is not, always in Baldwin City in ways that the city of Lawrence and maybe even Eudora get a different response.
Yeah, that's certainly a factor, that when we are further away from our next available unit, because we have to hit that 90th percentile for these times, that basically means that 9 times out of 10, we're meeting this time or better. So the further away we are, the further away additional resources are, that's going to drive that time up. Does that make sense?
I know it sometimes, and under some leadership with LDCFM, if the city of Lawrence has medic units that are transporting out of county, they would move Medic 11 up to the city of Lawrence to backfill in areas with more density. At other times, when Medic 11 has been deployed, that station has been backfilled from Lawrence. Talk to me about what's right and what's happened and what are we supposed to be doing?
Well, I think it's a resource management thing, and I might want to. I haven't been as involved in the shift commander role where I'm actively deploying the resources, but I know that they're very involved with trying to basically assess the total risk to the community. And so I know, Chief Wade, if you wouldn't mind speaking to some of that.
Yeah. Chiefs Roundtable here. Yes, so last year, Chief Llewellyn, prior to December, I was a battalion chief. Chief Llewellyn did direct all the battalion chiefs, if we're pulling Medic 11 up and Medic 12 for training, if they're going to be out of Baldwin or Eudora for an extended period of time, if the system allowed, we were moving a medic truck. We have directed our operations chief officers to backfill those stations with a medic truck. I couldn't give you an estimate on how often that's happening, but that is the direction that we've given our operations chiefs.
And that's still the case?
That they have not been told otherwise.
And that's only if both 11 and 12 are outside of are in Lawrence or outside of their jurisdictions?
Yeah, like if we're doing shift-wide training and we pull those crews up, or for a variety of reasons, if they're going to be out of the primary response area for an extended period of time, if the system allows, which is a fluid, ever-changing, we are supposed to be backfilling those stations.
Thank you.
Before you move off from this slide, I want to talk about the green line. And if that, since my assumption here is that Lawrence Memorial Hospital is inside the footprint of the green urban zone.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I'm going to push back to the slide before. So the green, I tried to use consistent colors when we made these. So the green demand zone there is the green lines on the next chart. So the story that jumps out to me from these two slides is that demand zone 1, which is we're in right now, it's essentially the north central part of Lawrence, is having a turnout, the travel time for that first unit, the first LDCFM unit to arrive on scene since 2020, that has gone up by, it was about 5-ish minutes in 2020. Now it's up to like a little over 8. So you're talking about over a 3-minute increase in that first unit to be on scene at the 90th percentile. And the thing about this, because we're talking urban demand zones for an EMS incident, a fire apparatus from LDCFM has ALS capability. So it will also stop the clock. So it's not just that we're not getting an ambulance there, it's that we're getting any LDCF unit there at the 90th percentile it's over 3 minutes longer. And the other factor, as Sarah mentioned, was we also have the kind of a home field advantage in District 1 that that's where most of our ambulances are taking patients. So you often have ambulances clearing LMH that are going to be in that zone that would be able to take calls. So if anything, that would be the place that you would hopefully have the most available resources moving through that demand zone. And yet, just due to increasing call volume, it is having a significant increase. And as we were mentioning about Medic 11, we talk about system status. A system status that causes that to go up also makes it less likely that we're able to deploy ambulances to those other urban demand zones.
But my question with that was going to be, and maybe Mackenzie covered this earlier and I'm confused with responses and calls and emergency thingies. But is it possible though that these LDCFM, the green line for the responses is influenced by non-emergent transports leaving LMH? Or am I being too hopeful? I mean, what is some of your explanation as to why that green line is so high?
Yeah, like you said, with some facilities like LMH being in the planning zone 1, the calls that we are responding to the hospital, even if it's a transfer back home, is a part of this number.
So if we ever do finally get non-emergent transport in that zone, maybe that will help bend that curve?
Yep, that is the intent. Also, with our mobile integrated health team, we expect to see the count decrease.
So I might be a squeaky wheel this evening then. Okay, so then moving forward, if there were to be an ask for another truck, what would be your potential outcomes, and what would be partners that you might look to bring to the table? Because as you look forward, some of your partners that you might bring to the table could expect ED diversion, and with that would come shared savings.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I know that when we set up our mobile integrated health team, and then also through conversations with the other groups to decrease the transfers that are non-emergent, that are using emergency resources, those conversations have been had. And I know that it's LDCFM's expectation and one of our main drivers to continue having those conversations, because when we decrease the risk in the city of Lawrence and Douglas County, it is impacting not just LDCFM folks, but everyone in the community that we're responding to. If we're having our resources being pulled to non-emergency calls, and we are prepared for emergencies and are unable to do that and have to rely on either mutual aid, auto aid, and other partners that way, or just do not have the proper resources, those non-emergency calls are really something to dive into. So as far as unit requests and resources, I would say that from the 2020 station optimization analysis, we have clearly identified and reviewed the data to say, here's where LDCFM is lacking. Here's our gaps. Here's what, based on response performance, and then the outcomes associated with that, longer response times. Instead of a room of origin fire, it becomes a building fire or a fire that is over across the entire floor. There's only so much that our tactics and strategies can do, but then looking outside of just that, as far as having resources available, the location of those resources and the types of resources. So the station optimization analysis in 2020 was really the main publication to say, we felt we had a problem. These other documents before, since we've redone our community risk assessment standards of cover and our strategic plan, we've done a whole bunch of those since 2006. We've identified issues in the 2017 accreditation report when we had a peer team come in and do another verification and validation. It was identified that LDCFM resources were not matched to the risk in the community. And so with those efforts and that recommendation, the station optimization analysis was done. There's been other analysis done by partnering agencies, even with our union, our IFF. They've partnered with the larger IFF group to do a study. And so we are seeing consistent data saying that right now our resources are not matching our risk. So we'll continue to communicate that, and then within the proper channels, come to you.
What
Thank you.
is that recommendation? It sounds like in all the examples you gave that it was for all, not just EMS. You're saying you don't have enough resources to do everything. Is that
Right.
correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And so within our station optimization analysis, we break it out by risk category, which fire, EMS, hazmat, and tech rescue. And so we show response performance and then demand and the location of that. And in all of our data sets, we're not getting an A+ on the card, and we're not getting an A. You had mentioned ISO earlier, and I just realized I never answered that question. Our deployment, as far as where our stations are, what units are staffed, impacts our ISO rating. As far as you had mentioned something else with ISO.
Accreditation.
Oh, accreditation. Oh, accreditation is just how we're doing business. It makes it so when we're presenting this data that we're not just pulling this together and bringing it up, but that it's a data set that's been verified and validated. But then also the process to be sure that LDCFM is focusing on things to make the department better, health and safety, human resources, all the things that we don't really talk about when we're up here talking about like emergency response, but supporting that entire system. So it's just a way that we do business. They don't set standards. We could look vastly different and still be accredited. So it's just a process that we do continuous improvement, a self-evaluation, and then get verified and validated.
And the ISO rating is related to fire response only. Does it do EMS? Does it even do hazmat, et cetera?
Correct. It's fire.
Okay, fire only. And then but the accreditation takes into account these other risk factors also.
Accreditation looks at any service that LDCFM provides. So if tomorrow we started providing like a drone service, then that would be a part of it. So we do report on hazmat, tech rescue, EMS, and fire. And though each of those programs I call it audited, get dove into by subject matter experts. And then we get recommendations off of that. So those recommendations drive our conversations here within our documents and then at the budget table.
I need to go back and reread the station optimization document. I know I read it at the time. If I remember right, there was a lot of information about like how we're serving needs within the city of Lawrence for station optimization, but nothing really much about those rural response zones or rethinking those. Am I right in saying that?
You were correct that the focus was primarily on urban zones because of the 5 dimensions of risk that were analyzed within that study. So there is a page that says the 5 dimensions of risk, and it's been a little while since I've gone back through it, but it's demand, disadvantaged populations, the current population, the property or assessed property value, and then like 2040 population projected. So every single year though, since we're talking about stations, we've gone back to the GIS tool and updated the information with, new incidents and all the new data that we have, and then reran it. And so we have not seen anything different than what that document was recommending and the recommendations from that.
In terms of the number of stations and general locations that would be helpful.
Yep. And the number of stations, the GIS tool we wanted to make it somewhat digestible. I don't think we would be successful if we came up and said we need 15 stations. However, is 7 stations in the city of Lawrence right? Is it 8 or is it 9? The document originally was supposed to start the conversation to say, we've talked about this before. We've seen it in our accreditation reports. It is valid. Here's the data to drive on with this. And then, 5 years later, here we are. So as far as matching resources to the risks that we have a few different ways of going about that. We have ways to decrease the risk and the incident count. However, as far as how we are resourced, that station optimization analysis it points right to it.
And I know we had talked some other time when you'd been here to the commission about can we go back and look at, with these recommendations for stations, how they impact rural response times for EMS?
100%.
And I know that's another whole nother data set, including the fact that we don't have the critical piece of data, which is when do we have first on scene in the rural areas that's not LDCFM. So when we're getting basic life support on scene, and that's data I would love to have. It involves a lot of organizations, and maybe that'd be best a conversation with our ECC partners who would at least have access to all that data, whether it's easy to digest from there or not. But that's, because we've been talking about the difference between first on scene, which for LDCFM is always advanced life support, no matter who it is that shows up there, and then that full complement of the number of people, which comes later. And in the rural area, it's flipped. You have your basic life support and maybe a full complement of people before you have your advanced life support on scene. And that's just something that we have to wrestle with. How do we understand both pieces, and what's the appropriate response times when you look at that model too?
Yeah, and one thing I will just plug real quick, so we can definitely update the station optimization analysis with different projections on where to add resources and then the impact countywide to response. The critical pieces of data, I've mentioned here before in our last meeting that right now the information system that fire departments across the nation use is old, older than me, and was last updated like when I was 2 years old. So that's a big issue when we're talking about millions of dollars to supply these emergency resources. The entire United States is moving to a new system that will have reporting capabilities, data analytics, and real-time dashboards and review, and also potential for collaboration, just like with our other partners, our other first responding partners out in the county. That goes live 2026. So next year, we should have a vastly different conversation about data, not just with LDCFM, but Douglas County wise, and then also be able to look at those resources more closely as they apply to the risk that we are seeing. So right now we go on a motor vehicle accident where the patient had a cardiac arrest and the car caught fire. The way that we're reporting, the way that that's coming up in our data is a motor vehicle accident. So it's EMS or tech rescue. In the new data system, we're going to say on this incident, we used our fire suppression resources, we used our EMS resources, and our tech rescue resources. And if we happen to not go on any hazmat calls or any tech rescue calls, we can look into that data and say, on all of these calls, we never used these resources. Maybe it's time to pivot and start looking at the resources that we actually need for the calls that we are seeing. So right now we're showing you a tiny little piece of every incident that we go on, but with the new data system, the ultimate goal for the data system is to help me have these conversations with you guys to say, here's what we're going on and here's what we're using and what we're needing.
So we have a lot of what we've been talking about is from we have the document from the 2022 standards of cover. Do we have any updated full documents yet?
We do not. So we will be doing, that is the project for next year. Same thing with the strategic plan.
Okay, thanks.
And then as we look towards 2026, has the team assessed resources that will be needed for FIFA World Cup?
Yes. So we actually have a few members on the LDCFM team that attend the FIFA World Cup meetings, whether that's like local or even in like the region. And so we actually have some trainings going on next week out in, I think, Missouri. So yes, we have looked at the financial impact, the emergency response impact, staffing impact, resource impact. One of the things that we've talked with Sarah about is instead of when we're trading in our ambulances and getting new ones, we have kept one of those so that we have an additional medic unit to use on that site. We're still getting information of what exactly regulation-wise, what we need to have on site and during what times, but that is specifically for the team. So the conversations about the influx of potential increased population is also a part of those conversations.
Okay. And so knowing that we currently have resource constraints.
Yep. So
Okay.
that has been, I think we talked about that last week. Yes, it is a part of conversation.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mackenzie, before you leave this chart, it stands out to me that Baldwin and Eudora have extremely low counts. And looking at your optimization, history put medic units in those cities because that's what was asked for. Based on your data, would you still put them there?
I could not respond to that with a gut feeling. That is one of those questions that I think is great to take our GIS team, have them run a few different tools and reports on it, and get back to you.
Thanks.
And I think we've got kind of two parallel pieces that we're weighing here. And one is, the call density, what the likelihood of that unit being used and needed repeatedly in that location, and then that response time. And I don't think we can go all with one or all with the other before we get in trouble. So I think that's what Commissioner Kelly might be getting at, is how are we balancing those? And if we were to, scrub the system and start over, would we balance it this way or would we do it a different way?
Yeah, we can definitely look at the GIS stuff with the updated data and bring that back to you. Sarah, I am so sorry. 50 minutes.
We asked questions.
Do you have more, you have
I'm
more
done.
slides, right?
Yeah.
We have more. Go ahead.
This is just for context is how our call volume growth has changed over the years. So our agency started as a merger in 1997, and the blue line is the number of total calls per year. I did it that way because at different points we carved out calls differently. So the only consistent data set I could get was the total call volume, but the majority of calls our ambulances do go to. And then the bars for each year represent the number of units we had in service. And what you can see through this chart that jumps out to me is that for the first 10, 15 years or so of our agency's existence, our ambulance expansion kept up with the rate of rise of call growth. And then we had added in 1998 and then again in 2003, and then we went almost 15 years before we added another station at Medic 12 in 2017. And that's the same time in our standard of cover document from that year that we identified that we needed Station 6, which implicitly is a Medic 6. And at that point, you can kind of see where we were with the star. Since that time, we had a slight dip with COVID that has more than rebounded since. And so you can see we've had a 5% call volume growth year over year since that. So when you look at where we're looking at, and we're taking all of these measures to try to reduce our call volume demand, and I think they're really working, and we are going to see more benefits in the future than we even have so far. I don't necessarily know that it's realistic to expect we're going to be able to drive demand back down to the 2017 levels. So that's what that slide was for. And
Do you mind if I ask?
Yeah, please.
Question about that. At what point did firefighters start being cross-trained as ALS providers, as paramedics and such? Because that's the other piece that's not in the data here, is not just that when we've added medic units, but when we've added the staffing, the medical staffing on fire trucks.
So I know that we had ALS staffing from the time of the merger, which was 1997. So this whole chart, you would have had a joint agency with cross-trained staff. I believe before that, we had some ALS staff on Lawrence Fire Department. I don't know how many that was. I don't know that it was consistent. I could try to get you that data.
But they weren't serving as first responders before the merger.
I don't believe so.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
So prior to the merger, so before 1996, Lawrence Fire Department was not serving as first responders. Police departments were.
So the fact that some of the firefighters were cross-trained as medic, I mean, how many of them would have been cross-trained for that?
Before 1996?
Yeah.
I don't know that we have that data on the top of our.
But not many.
Not many, but the point is they weren't working as first responders in that sense anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But this chart was after the joint. So in this point, we had a joint agency where we were either cross-trained or at the beginning years, beginning that cross-training process to do exactly that.
LDCFM never was running with EMTs like some of our neighboring jurisdictions as firefighters. It was always advanced life support. Up until a few years ago, we now will hire EMTs, but have the 3-year time to get their paramedic certification. So that is one difference from LDCFM since the beginnings of LDCFM than some of our other fire departments in other cities surrounding us.
So did we always have fire trucks coming and they could be first on scene and provide ALS support?
Correct. However, so if we look at Topeka, their fire trucks may not have ALS responders, so they're not stopping the clock. They're not that qualified unit on a medic call. However, they are the first response unit or one of the first responders within that jurisdiction, so they still arrive on scene. But it's also about how you like classify care and like the risk of the EMS incident, but it is different than LDCFM.
So a little more like our rural model that the first on scene is not yet ALS, that comes.
Correct. Yep. So there's just those different protocols that you can follow.
And so this was, I believe this is the last slide. This is just kind of showing that if we, instead of talking about 2017, from the time when we had the most recent renewal of the EMS agreement, if you took the number of ambulances we had divided by the number of calls, so not saying every ambulance actually ran the exact same number of calls, but just to give you a baseline, at that point, we were averaging 2080 incidents per ambulance in 2021. Since that time, our call volume growth to last year was more than one additional ambulance's worth at the 2021 rates. So even if we move the goalpost slightly to 2021, you can still see that there has been a big increase in demand in our system. And that is what is reflected in those extending travel time numbers. So I think, is that, yep. Does anybody have any questions?
If we've gone over, Sarah, it's totally my fault.
And I feel like I need to be clear here. We can take as much time as we need. I just know that there are some pressing issues in front of us, and I wanted to give the commission plenty of time to talk about those pressing issues. Much glory to Mackenzie's level of data. It did not seem as pressing to me in the evening tonight, but I'm really glad we had the conversation and we can take as much time as we need. But I thought commissioners would have questions about what was presented to the city commission last week and was trying to they have no information on that. So this was your opportunity to begin to tell them that information.
Before we leave those slides, it's interesting to me that our response time, because you said, I think I caught you, Chief Darling, at the end saying that's why our response, but actually what I saw in the high EMS response rates is actually response times going lower, even though we're seeing a higher number of calls. That's interesting to me.
So that is one slice of the EMS call. And if you look at the N value for that particular one, those are relatively low numbers. The vast majority of our EMS calls don't fall into that category. And we also have that's not all of the calls we run either, because there's a lot of policies with outliers and data where they manage it consistently to make sure that we're looking at apples to apples, where it's only a response that starts emergency response, ends emergency response, so they don't change how we're deploying midstream, because that would throw off your numbers. So after you get done removing all of the things that don't qualify, you're left with a relatively small data set. And especially when we're saying things at the 90th percentile, I mean, if you have less than 10, by definition, that's all of them, right? So that's how you can kind of get there. So the charts that I was presenting later, that aggregates all risk categories for EMS for travel time. The one we had up was one example out of the 14 tables. Does that help explain that?
It I'm not able to process all of the data in my head to sort of do that. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think we need to keep having conversations, because I think we're going to shift our conversation here in a minute, but we're being asked to make decisions when I'm feeling like we're getting slices of data to make decisions on rather than full data. Like if we're being shown high EMS and being told it's a low N value and the numbers are getting better, but then when we use that as evidence to an argument and we're saying, well, that's not the right data set, I think just keep that in mind as we continue to have conversations. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I believe that the intent was more to show the process rather than all of our data, because that would be 14 more slides.
Fair enough.
So
where could
my
we
presentation
access?
was not originally
Totally.
that at
Yeah.
all.
Where could we access the data charts for like the moderate risk categories as opposed to the high risk categories to get a larger sample size?
Yep. So our annual compliance report that these data tables are pulled from is actually in its final steps of being validated right now by our reviewer. And so we should have those available, I would say in the next week or two, and we can distribute those. I was really hoping to have it for this presentation, but I really want it to get like the final blessing before we distribute it out.
If you're done with the slides, let's stop sharing.
All right, Commission. Thanks for sitting through that. It was a lot of information. And I'll tell you what, this group has been working really hard to try and get this information out. So if it seems overwhelming now, feel what we've been feeling over the past month with meetings with Sarah and with the city. So April 1st, we were given a task to give the city manager Craig Owens a proposal from the LDCFM. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it was at the city commission on April 1st. We were to give a proposal to give him a net amount of $1.9 million cut to the 2026 budget for LDCFM. And so with the direction of that, maneuvering stuff around, we have shared costs between the city and county. And so anything we shift from the city is going to affect the county. And so the proposal that we gave after doing the math was to drop an engine 5, who's in the middle of the city. That would drop 4 people off. Upstaff our ladder truck, which currently has 3. We would make that to a 4-person staffing. And then upstaff an additional medic truck with 2 people. And we would drop our minimum staffing down 1. And we go from 39 to 38. And so that shift would shift our city county percentages based off of how many people are on medic trucks versus minimum staffing. It would go from 36 to approximately 41%, if I remember correctly.
I think it
So that's a
depends on
pretty-
how we handle the battalion chief. So it could be, I think, anywhere between 41 and 44%.
Correct. So that's a pretty big shift looking from your perspective. It's also a big shift looking from our perspective, looking as our department as a whole on what we're giving. We're giving a fire truck up in the city of Lawrence, and upstaffing a medic truck and upstaffing a ladder to accomplish that. And so that's been our discussions that we've been having here recently. They've been crucial conversations which we've been having, and I'm just glad we're talking about this opportunity. And unfortunately, it comes at a time when you see the numbers showing you our EMS calls and the demand is going on there too. So it may seem like, well, let's shift here our costs from the city over to the county, and then it's a problem fixed. That's not our strategy. We're really trying to battle decreasing the cuts, but also expanding as well. So we got plans to expand into 2 future stations, and making those cuts while we're expanding is a challenge. And so that's what we really wanted to talk about tonight, to make sure we brought that to your attention. But we wanted to make sure you guys had the data to go with it as well. So it's not just making this up to make it seem like it's the biggest priority. So what questions do you guys have on that I can answer for you?
When you say upstaffing a medic unit, you're talking about instead of 2 people, 4 people on that medic unit or an additional medic unit?
Add an additional medic truck.
Okay.
So we currently have 7 in our system, medic 5 in the city, and then 1 in Baldwin and 1 in Eudora. So we would add another medic 6. You can call it 6.
And adding an additional personnel on ladder 4?
Yes.
And then engine 4 is currently not a frontline, currently not
You're talking
staffed
about
as
engine
frontline?
5?
Engine 5?
It is currently a frontline apparatus. Yes, that's the one we're recommending to take out of response.
You've had one of the engines that often hasn't been staffed just because of staffing levels. Was that engine 4 or engine 5?
That's been engine 5. That's
Okay.
at Station 5 at 19th and Iowa.
So it's often not staffed now, so dropping that off, does that really impact?
It does, because those are temporary. That was my understanding, is that change was as a result of their budget cuts in 2024.
That's correct. Our number of filled FTE positions was low. And so in order to keep Engine 5 in service on a daily basis, we were having to utilize overtime at a very high rate. We implemented shutting it down when staffing levels dropped below our daily minimum of 39. Since our recruit class has graduated approximately a month ago, that truck has consistently been in service because of our staffing. Our filled FTEs were back up to where we should be.
I want to make sure I understand you.
Yes.
Because it sounds like there was only one proposal, but my understanding was there was two proposals. Do you want to talk about the first proposal or?
That's the
do you just-
first proposal. The second proposal was going to be a city manager requested not to depend on the county to do any kind of extra funding. They said, what would the city look like? And so we currently have 6 battalion chiefs that run operations on a daily basis, 2 per day. So we were recommending dropping 3. So we would only have 1 per day operating our city and county. And so 6 to 3 would be a drop. Also looking at our prevention division and our training division, we were going to recommend dropping 1 of those members on each of those divisions. And currently we only have 3 in those divisions. And so those would be drastic cuts. And we would also remove Engine 5 as well, just like our proposal 1. This would be also proposal 2 to remove that truck as well. And we'd also reduce services for 1 medic truck, whether it take 1 medic truck out or to change that response unit to 40-hour week opportunities. We have some gray area that we can wiggle around. Either way, it's going to affect the cost. And so, of course, proposal 2 was a pretty drastic hit to our department.
You talk to me about the data that you used for each proposal, like like the proposal you just described. How did you get to that point using whether it's standards of, what data did you use to get to there?
Well, go ahead, Tyler.
Mackenzie, jump in. Honestly, it was, how do we hit the number? Very difficult. Engine 5, that shutting it down was strictly based on there is another staffed fire unit in the city that's not going to leave planning zone 5 without a staffed fire truck. We also looked at, management reductions, which is the 3 battalion chief positions. The thought process there was we still have 3 battalion chiefs. While it would be a major hit to operations and firefighter safety, we still have 3 battalion chiefs holding those positions, serving as incident commanders, but we would lose that safety officer component on scene. The prevention and training divisions, we recommended a position from those to generally stay in line with the results of Balancing Act, the budget tool that the city put out. We had reductions in all of our programs. And so trying to balance the results of Balancing Act while making cuts that still allowed us to function at the highest level we can. It's an 18 FTE reduction, which is significant. That's in a very general sense how we got to that proposal.
How about the other proposal? What data did you use to get to the other proposal?
The city's preferred proposal?
Yes.
Yeah. With much of the data that we saw tonight, that our call volume is increasing on the EMS side at a drastic rate. And while we have implemented things, MIH, non-emergency transfers, we do expect that number to go down, but not significant enough. And so we really do feel, we hear it from our crews, getting some relief on the EMS side while also being able to provide really the same level of service that we've been providing with that increase to staff that extra medic unit.
Did you consider any other proposals that you're not sharing with us this evening?
Not officially. We, as a command staff, have met many times. We put a budget team together, members at all levels of our organization, from firefighter, engineer, captains, lieutenants, IAFF participated, where we started to kick around things that we felt was, although not preferred, doable. And the city's preferred proposal was the consensus of the group. That was the one we would like to move forward with. And then we did have a short turnaround on the, call it bad proposal. So command staff got together to work through that. And then we did loop in our department-wide budget team on those options.
So I want to make sure I summarize what you told me, which was the proposal that had significant cuts that staff is not happy with was done just to hit a number. And the proposal to pass the cost on to the county was done with data. Is that what you said? And no other proposals were brought forward?
There were no other proposals that were brought forward, Commissioner, and I appreciate that question. And yes, but again, we were also tasked with finding the reduction in line with Balancing Act, the program, where our programs landed within Balancing Act. And so for the significant reduction proposal, that is how we landed on what we were going to reduce to stay in line generally with Balancing Act. That was the direction from the city manager's office.
And Commissioner, it may seem like we're just throwing numbers. Those were not just thrown out there. It was a committee that we put together that looked at it. We had a whole list of opportunities of other things we were looking at. So I know you want to look at there are ideas, but that would affect the county a lot differently as well too. And so although they seemed apparent after our governance meetings and talking, we did not want to pursue that at all. And so meaning like having station 11 and 12 all medical and the county cover that. We didn't want to go that route. Even though they're only in the county, do they come here? Those were discussions that we discussed. We have different divisions within our department. We have an EMS division, which is Chief Darling, and he has mobile integrated health. He has the billing department. They're all covered by the county. On the city side, they have the prevention division, which is Chief King and, the captain and lieutenant who are covered by the city. Everybody else is all shared cost. And so everything that we went through, it was not like a one-day meeting. No, this is what it looks like. Tear this page off and this is what it looks like. It was a lot of discussion and we had a lot of ideas that we kind of prioritized as not ideal, but this is the route that we would recommend. What I could tell you is, as a fire chief, looking at cuts, it's never a good day when you're looking that way. But I do know that I also look out for the people who we're protecting, and that as long as we can protect them with what we have, it makes me, feel like it's accomplishing a goal, a challenge. And I think we hit that. All different levels throughout the department, the command staff throughout our department, the local, we all supported option one. And so, for a situation that we were given a cut 1.9, that's a pretty big solution that we came up with. And so I can speak for the group. It was not easy, and it's still not easy, and it's not done. So we're still working at it to see what we can come up with. Our governance meetings, we're having discussions, looking at details like battalion chiefs, looking at other details. Are we still looking at the right percentages and how we break the percentage down? Before you know it, we'll be at 50-50, and then what do we do there? So we're open for ideas. We're open for suggestions on where we look at, but that's kind of where we're at right now.
So earlier this evening, Mackenzie said that the need was for all services, not just for EMS. And yet this proposal is to increase EMS, but not all services, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So our data and the station optimization analysis looked at all risk classifications and hazards. This is based on the Balancing Act, where the fire suppression program was decreased.
And just for the public, does the Balancing Act include all of Douglas County or just the city of Lawrence?
It includes the city of Lawrence.
Thank you.
So can I just cover our numbers again? So So option number one is a decrease of 1.9 million to the city budget and an increase of 1.9 million to the county budget. Okay, tell us what those numbers would be.
No. I don't know that we have those precise, at least I don't.
We don't have the precise number. I can tell you that the option one did not fully hit the 1.9 reduction that the city asked us to hit. There is a significant increase to the county. But again, there's some other things that are being discussed in the governance regarding battalion chief classification in terms of the if the current methodology is utilized. We don't have that number set in stone, but we're obviously working with Sarah and we can provide that to you.
Commissioner, what I would say is that from my experience and, an additional medic unit is over $1 million a year in expense. So if the medic unit switches over, but the percentages don't quite work because the city still shares a percentage of that, I would anticipate though that our addition would be over $1 million a year.
So on option number two, it's a decrease of the 1.9 million to the city budget. And then what impact on county budget?
We don't have that yet.
An overall decrease, presumably. It's
Yes.
taking a medic unit out. It's decreasing the shared costs, some other things. So, but we don't know what that number would be.
Yeah, it's early.
Okay. In proposal number one, of adding a medic unit proposal, where is that proposed to be added, or what would be the process be to find out where that would be recommended?
Yeah, so we would, a few things. So like last year, we talked about potentially adding Medic 6 in these conversations. And at one point, we talked about the downtown location of, we call it Station 1.5. We've transitioned that a little bit. We also had talked about potentially partnering with other first responding agencies within the city of Lawrence. We have not identified an exact spot for that. When we talk about FIFA World Cup, obviously there's going to be an increase of population and risk in certain areas of our community that would come into play for 2026 and during the build for Station 6.
When you say other responding agencies, are we talking about CFD1, or are we talking about adding it to a station that LDCFM already has, adding another medic unit there?
Last year, we talked about all the above, and I haven't had any direction this year to exclude anything. And then you had asked about the impact to the city. The Balancing Act is supposed to be focused on the city of Lawrence. All of these options would impact LDCFM's presence in Douglas County.
Can we have access to what the Balancing Act kind of spoke into in terms of priorities for LDCFM? Because I haven't seen that.
To be honest, I don't know if it's been released. It's something we'll check tomorrow and we'll work through Sarah.
Because I'd be curious if that's something that, countywide we would concur on those points or not. Chief Darling is adding it to his notes.
So I just want to make sure Chief, you said you looked at lots of different things, but you didn't articulate exactly what those things were. So like one thing this commission has endorsed is looking at non-emergency transfers to try to reduce the cost. Was that considered and decided not something to do to try to meet a budget number? I mean, because I think we haven't heard any more about that discussion. Moving ambulance around. I mean, it just seems like.
Is the question about decrease in revenue from the non-emergency transfers or decrease in demand of the service?
I'm curious to understand the proposals that were discussed, because while I hear that what I heard was that there was a request to reduce the budget for LDCFM from the city. That wasn't a request from the county. That was a request from the city. Then I heard that we created a proposal to meet that request that required cutting staff, which we don't want to do. And then I heard we came up with another proposal that transferred that cost over to the county and that it was based on data, which is just the number of calls that are going up. It's not about where those calls are or how we use them. So I'm interested in understanding from a from an EMS standpoint, like how are we looking to reduce costs maybe to meet that delta that we're trying to get to? It seems like we're just saying we're trying to get to this number and we have some data that says calls are going up, but we don't have any other data. I don't understand what else we haven't looked at. And so I'm trying to figure out like, what else do we look at? I just want to give you another chance before you say we looked at everything. And
Well, so there are a lot of initiatives we are trying to do to decrease our call volume. And the call volume, it's not just because we don't want to run calls, it's because, as our data shows, increased unit utilization results in increased time for our people to get on scene and start making a difference when the seconds count. So that's the end goal. With the initiatives like non-emergency transfers, the expectation is that will reduce the demand on our system. But I looked at the last 5 years of data, and we're in the 700 to 800 non-emergency transfers per year. So even if we eliminate all of them, that will really help. It'll make a big difference because especially when some of those trucks are going out of town for a long period of time, it's going to increase our unit reliability. It's not going to get us back to where we were back in 2017 when we first identified a need for Medic 6. Is that the question? Does that answer your question? Or
it's progress, right? I mean, I don't know that it's the solution, but it's progress. And I guess that's what I'm asking for is like, how have we looked at all the options for us here? And I'm just going to say again, like, what I've heard you all say is you need more resources and you're not meeting your response times. You're not saying that's only EMS. So I'm trying to understand why you're only expecting the county to cover higher EMS costs, but telling the city it's okay if we don't.
We are not telling the city that it's okay. The city is telling us that their expectation of the service level for fire suppression is lower than what we are providing right now. So we are providing them what that looks like, given the budget constraints and direction of lower service level for fire suppression. Other things that we've looked at, just not on the EMS side, charging for false alarms, agreements for increased revenue from some of our other partners in Douglas County, using aid in different ways. We staff special events and yes, to say that we have drawn up the drawing board, we have.
I do think, and I think this is part of the complexity of, but with joint governance, this is the first conversation we're getting.
Say more about that, Sarah. I don't think I'm following what you're trying to say.
I don't think the county is a full partner in those conversations. And while I do think those number of non-emergent transports would go down, would it be enough to get you to your budget cut? Maybe, so I do think that's part of what I'm concerned with here is that now on April 10th, we're looking at a situation where the county is going to have to raise taxes. The last time we absorbed $1 million transfer from the city of Lawrence for LDCFM, we raised taxes. So we're in a situation now where we've come to a proposal. I'm not a part, the county is not necessarily at the table for those deliberations on how we get to this point in a joint governance model, that we could look at some potentially other solutions as to how to approach this budget situation.
Sarah, I think you had an update on the non-emergency transport. I think city
My
commission
understanding
has
is
said
city,
yes,
it's
county
not
commission
in front of
said
the
yes.
city. The city has not approved it.
The city attorneys, the city commission.
Well, it hasn't gone to the city commission. That's what I know.
But I don't think the holdup is LDCFM. Is that correct?
No, correct. No.
Okay.
So is there anything, who can move that forward?
I will continue to have conversations with City Hall.
Okay. Is there anything that a commissioner can do to move that forward?
You can always call city commissioners and tell them we need to get it on an agenda.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Because
Maybe that's something that all 5 of us can do.
And even once it's all approved, finding other partners to step up and pass it over is going to be a lengthy process. So it's not going to be an immediate help anyway.
Right. Those conversations have already started.
Oh, good.
Mhm.
And are there conversations that could be had with KU?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe that's something also that we could look into.
But
Okay.
I'm not certain that's going to get to us through a proposal for 2026. So that's part of, and that's one of the things I'm kind of looking for direction on. You know, traditionally, as we move into the budget process, LDCFM is not a community, we don't treat them like a community partner because we're in joint governance, but I don't have full access to all of their financial information like I do county departments. So they live in this little middle zone. And, you know, I'm not sure how to approach this request for the preferred proposal into the county budget process. If you were a county department, I would ask for a lot of detail for $1 million increase in services in terms of that explanation and that data and those financials that go into that. I would also ask it from a community partner for $1 million increase. So traditionally with LDCFM, we don't get that kind of information. So what I'm hoping we can work out now, kind of on the fly, is to sort of to have some sort of merged document set and that you go through the county budget process because, and honestly, I'm not sure how it will go. You know, like I said, I think it would require a tax increase for us to deal with that proposal. So I'm hoping to get some direction from the commission as to how you would like us to proceed with the city's preferred proposal.
And I had a couple of thoughts with that. So as I loved the data, bugged you about a lot of questions with what you presented. Most of that data was around EMS because that's the part that falls under the county. But in order to kind of cover some of these joint governance conversations, I think we need to fully understand the fire side too. To Commissioner Kelly's point about, how are we balancing this, and what is appropriate to fall to us and what is not. And so if there's a similar presentation that went to the city about fire or all response, I think that would be good for us to see so we can kind of start digging into not just our part of it, because I kind of think we feel we're not being asked to just pay for our part of it. We're asked to kind of take on some of the burden that the city is not wanting to. It feels that way from up here. So I think that would be helpful. The other piece is, I kind of poked at these 2 different models we have for EMS response, that within the city, you've got, ALS, your advanced life support that is first on scene, and then the full complement of people fills in after that. In the county or in the rural part of Douglas County, we've got basic life support that is first on scene, and then advanced life support that is coming after. We haven't talked about if the need is to increase medical EMS response. Are we looking at taking that model that's currently been acceptable in the rural part of Douglas County and making that available in the city of Lawrence? And I would think that would that be showing up with a squad as opposed to an ambulance? Maybe that's an EMT and a paramedic instead of 2 paramedics. I don't know what that looks like at all, but is that a conversation? And I know that that's not ideal. We would love to be able to move everybody to an ALS on scene first, but that's not within our ability to pay for in the rural area. So has there been a conversation about that?
Yes, there has been. Chief Hardy mentioned the budget committee earlier. The things that you have mentioned were discussed in that group. And when we talk about optimal and ideal, those were words that we did not use. At one point, I think I said we are trying to find the least bad option and go with that. So it is very difficult, to your point earlier, bringing data that says one thing and then being requested to show an impact and an adjustment of service levels, different thing than optimal or ideal. But yes, at our next meeting that we can get on the books for next month, we can dive into that specifically.
And I wonder if that's something that the city kind of understands, that if they're passing on this high level of cuts to LDCFM, that, service among medical response might also be different. Like, I don't know what happened in Balancing Act, where they're saying that, we would accept a lower level of service. Do they also feel that way about medical response? Because that may be what we're talking about too.
We are at a very difficult point where all of our budget conversations have become a year-long budget conversation, and none of it's positive. That is also being compounded with these documents and with these studies that have said, expand, expand, expand. We need another medic unit. We need another fire truck, all of these resources. So that is one thing that we've also struggled with the process, to separate those things and actual need versus reaction of how to get the dollar.
If it's okay for me, I really appreciate the work of LDCFM. It's a fantastic organization. I've enjoyed every time that I have interacted with them in the public and as a volunteer. So I'm sorry that these are the conversations we have to have. This isn't where we thought we'd be a couple years ago when we were having conversations about needs.
Commissioner Willie and Commissioner Kelly, the city commission did not say, this was not their plan, was to put it on the county. This was LDCFM's proposal. And so that was their reaction on April 1st, was their reaction, just like your reaction tonight is your first. And so it was not by city commission at all to say, have the county cover.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I do believe at the end of, I guess I want to say at the end of, my understanding is the end of that, they told you to pursue that option. So I don't want, okay.
And Chief Hardy, I appreciate that. And I also do think that it is, based on my listening to the conversation, then just a history of things, it is valid to point out that we are having this conversation distinctly because for 2 years running now, maybe longer from your guys' perspective, but a solid 2 years running, you've been asked by one of your primary funders, to cut and to figure that out. And so we are in these conversations because of that. And what I want to say about that is really, directed at our partners at the city, and that I'm struggling with that coming to the surface and being what all of you are spending your time and energy on, and how many conversations we are having before we get to a renegotiated governance agreement. I'm really struggling with the timing of that, and that's not on you all. So I'm just sharing that feedback for my fellow commissioners here and for partners at City Hall, that it's a significant change conversation to be having while also in a space, in a time of having to renegotiate that governance agreement. So that's not a solution or answer to anything. It's just a feeling that I want to make a point about. And I also, Mackenzie, I heard you say earlier, hopefully I paraphrase it correctly, that the city has communicated to you in response to Commissioner Kelly's questions that the city has communicated that lowering the level of service for fire suppression is acceptable in the direction that you've been given. That's an interesting element, again, of, I know we always we sort of beat this dead horse, so to speak, about that, are we expected to follow suit? And to Commissioner Willie's point, assume that maybe we've got to figure out how to reduce EMS services along with that. I don't like that option. I'm not into it at all. I do not think that we should be talking about decreasing the level of services. I understand it's a necessary conversation driven by budgets sometimes. But I don't echo that sentiment and feel frustrated by the idea that maybe there's some expectation that that's how we'll follow suit in order to make up the difference, in order to make it so that we aren't having this conversation so constantly, right? Again, everything that has been talked about here tonight and over the years, obviously boils down to there's no good, easy answer, right? And it's really complicated stuff. We figured out some things. We're still really trying to nugget through and figure out other things. But I do just want to be really clear and say, like, the only reason we are having this conversation is because one of your funding partners has been very direct in saying you've got to cut and we will lower our standards to match it. That, from my perspective and my history on the commission, that is not what you've heard from the county commission. And I'm frustrated by the reality that such significant changes are being forced to the surface before we can have a renegotiated and a heftier conversation about our governance agreement and what that looks like moving forward. Because to me, standards of care and optimization and all of those things that we're talking about are core parts of those conversations. And we're either sort of having to rush through some of those assessments and try and make analyses of what it all means and where to prioritize and how to triage. And that does not feel like good process to me. And that, again, that's not on you all. You've been put in an incredibly difficult position. And I just want to acknowledge that, and that it's hard for you to keep having these conversations internally, I would assume, that it's pretty painful at times, and that it's difficult to have them publicly too. So for whatever that's worth to you all, like, I appreciate the emotional labor that's involved in that, on top of all of the professional labor that you're doing to try and figure out how to make ends meet.
Appreciate that, Commissioner Reed.
And I just want to say, I also agree. I find it highly unacceptable that they would suggest lowering standards. And to the point that our city is also, or funded partner is also interested in bringing a national partner here in 2026, and yet is also suggesting lowering standards, knowing that you could be putting you at risk, right, for health and well-being, but also overall safety infrastructure for not just the city, but also the county overall. And I think that is highly unacceptable.
Sorry, I just have one more comment that came back around to the front of my mind. To sort of back up our staff and Sarah's comments earlier about being hopeful that we can find a way to be more involved in the full review and process of these different proposals and options that we have to consider based on the reality of circumstances. So, and this just, again, it's really a message for our city partners, and that I can remember sometime, I think it was during budget season last year, a city commissioner specifically calling the county a minority partner. On paper, sure. That's true. 36% cost share. We're not the majority of your budget. I understand the notion of that. But I do believe that just a simple look at those numbers and an assumption that the county, quote unquote, the minority partner, will always follow suit is not a good approach to joint governance. And so I do hope that wherever we land in 2026 and what we're facing right now imminently and what the future holds, that we are thinking about, sort of regardless, quite frankly, of the percentage breakdown of cost share, that there is equal access and equal opportunity to be participating in the assessment of and contemplating of what could look different about this, and that us not being a complete part of that conversation is part of the problem, in my opinion.
I have a question for Sarah. What is the next conversation? Because it probably can't just wait until budget and have, here's a proposal, take it or leave it, or what's the city doing? Like, how do we engage better in those conversations? And most of that will happen at a staff level, but what's next?
Well, as I mentioned, I was hopeful to get LDCFM on our work session agenda list for May to go into, deeper information for those last few slides you saw related to a medic unit. However, that almost to me feels like doing the budget before we're doing the budget, and an opportunity, most of your community partners and your departments don't get those kinds of opportunities, but I also understand that this is a unique situation. I'm going to send them some forms and tell them to fill them out. And they've agreed, and we'll kind of walk them through our process, unless we hear differently, in a way that we haven't done with LDCFM, but frankly, it's still really late in the game for me to be considering $1 million increases to services.
I just want to say I don't envy the position that LDCFM has been in for this budget cycle, the previous budget cycle, the project cycle before that. Just a lot of chaos to take in and kind of managing these two partners, and the city goes first in the budget process and we go second. And there's been significant changes every year that I've been involved in budget for LDCFM based on those two partners. And I think we've tried to be steady and reliable. This one, it's even hard to know like what the city says this now. Is this really what they're going to follow through with? They haven't in the past. So it's just a really hard spot for all of us to be in and trying to figure out how to move forward. But definitely the more you can involve us in the conversation as early as possible, I think the better that we'll be able to process it.
I want to express my gratitude for you answering questions and providing data. I think in my time on the commission, I don't think I can remember one time that we've said no to LDCFM. And sometimes those choices were made by the city and we still said yes. So if they said, hey, we should do this, I remember a station over on Haskell, right? And we need to put fencing. I think we have always said yes. And how can we do it? Last year, when we talked about station expansion, we said, yes, we'll sign up for it. We budgeted for it. When we said, hey, we need years to do a study to determine whether we're in line with funding, and that was a tax increase for Douglas County, we said, yes. It is super attractive right now, especially with elections coming up, to be able to say, I'm not in favor of a tax increase, right? You're not going to find me say that today. But I think what we have to do as a county commission, as a city commission, and as LDCFM is work better together. That means you all coming up with more possible strategies. That's why I was trying to dig at that. Like, I understand that, that they told you to make a cut and you're trying to come up with a way, understanding the pressure that's happening in that space and the power struggles that are happening in that space, to come up with a strategy that still gets to their budget goal, right? Which is to not have a tax increase. I think we owe it to sit down all together and to continue to brainstorm how we solve a challenge that's before us. I don't think it does us any good as a community to create a political football that goes up and down Mass Street with us telling the city they're not doing a good job and then telling us, like, help us out here because the data shows this. I think through some of the questions, I'm not sure I think we can use the data to get to an answer if we want to, but I don't think the proposal that was put forward because that's what the data said. I think to your point, Mackenzie, you said we need more. That's the proposal, is that we need more. I appreciate you being here because I think there is a missing part of this trifecta here, and that's the city in tonight's conversation. What are they owning of their part of saying, hey, we need to make some reductions? And I think that's where we have to do a better job. So to give Sarah guidance, I think that's where we have to work with the city and say, we need to have maybe a more robust, maybe it needs to involve commissioners. Maybe it needs to be more of a joint work session, whatever that needs to be. But I think from the county's perspective, we've been very supportive of our LDCFM staff, and we want to continue to do that. But we have our own limitations as well, and I know you all recognize that. So how do we work together for the betterment of our community, for the safety of our community within our resources? And to just say, well, we don't want to cut it, so we're going to send it down the street. Like, we can do better than that, especially as Commissioner Reed said, when we're looking at redoing our agreement, we can do better than that. I think we owe it to our community to do better than that, to really look at what are our needs, to understand that even though we might want to get to a certain response time or standard, that's the goal. I don't think any of you are saying, like you said tonight, we're not going to have 15 more stations, right? That's not your expectation. How we make progress towards that, maybe that's not a 1-year progress because of the situation the city's in. Maybe that's a 3 or 4-year progress. I think we can do a better job here than what we've demonstrated in the past couple of weeks when it comes to LDCFM in our community. Does that give you what you need, Sarah? Not yet.
Sure. I mean, I think we'll get a schedule. We'll get them on the schedule to talk more in May, and we'll get them some information. We'll ask them to submit information related to our supplemental requests and go into greater detail in terms of what this ask would be of the county.
And when the budget request does come before us, it would be nice if City of Lawrence would also come before the county. Many times when budget requests do come before us and or information, the other partners are often here. And oftentimes they do come up and take questions. So it would be nice if the City of Lawrence would actually be present as a partner and funded partner, right? Almost like a service agreement between the two of you. So it would be nice if they would be here so that they could actually take questions.
Anything else, commissioners? All right, this is a general business item and we take public comment on that. Is there anyone who'd like to provide public comment this evening on this item?
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Simon Stevenson, Lawrence, Kansas. I'm an engineer paramedic with LDCFM. And I stand here before you tonight in support with the documents and data that has been presented, showing the need for additional ambulances and additional resources. As you can tell, LDCFM is a very data-driven organization. Whether it goes from data when it comes to fires, minimizing damage, whether it goes to EMS efforts and improving cardiac arrest survivability. The data is tracked meticulously. As you've all already seen tonight from the department's presentation, response times and unit reliability are no different. The data before you paints a picture, to me anyway. A picture of two entities engaged in a battle of tug of war. One, the demand for a service, and the other, the entity in charge of providing that service. For a long time, this battle is held in a deadlock. But for almost the last decade, you have seen one side call in more and more reinforcements, while the other side remains stagnant, and our grip is starting to slip. The needs have existed well before any of these difficult budget parameters from the city. Commissioners, do not let the constraints of the city's budget distract you from providing appropriate EMS services to the citizens of Douglas County. Increasing call volumes, increasing response times, which in turn lead to increased overall on-call times, lead to a less reliable system, and in my eyes is already a service reduction even before any discussion from 2025 budget. I ask you, as a member of this community, as a member of this department, strongly consider this information presented before you. Strongly consider taking a proactive first step towards the much needed expansion identified almost a decade ago. We all hold responsibility within this department. I hold my responsibility to keep my training appropriately for these people. You hold the direct responsibility to ensure we have enough units on the street. And lastly, the community holds a responsibility to demand an appropriate fire and EMS system. Thank you.
For public comment?
Hello, I'm TJ Everett. I had not planned to say anything tonight, but I just wanted to express my thanks. I work on Medic 3 and Medic 11 half of the time. And so I spend a decent amount of time out in the county. I'm very thankful that I respond to emergencies and don't work on the budget. After tonight's meeting, I get the sense that this agreement between the city and the county and this organization is incredibly messy. But I'll just offer that being on an ambulance most of the time, that is, as a citizen or a lifelong resident of Lawrence and Douglas County, the ambulances, that's what we are getting hit with medical calls. And so the prospect of losing an ambulance to me, is very concerning, but then I can see it would be very concerning for county residents as well, because one less ambulance in the city, that spills over pretty heavily into our county response. So I really appreciated how you handled the proposal tonight, kind of being thrown this football, like you said, from up Mass Street. And you said, well, let's just try to work together to get this. So thank you. Please do that. We definitely appreciate your commitment to our organization. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Anyone online, Sarah? Okay. This was an informational item only, so we don't have any action to take, commissioners. With that, we are done with our general business, and I have to log back into my computer. Well, let's go to the next item. I don't need a computer. Our next item is appointments. I know that we had a joint city-county appointment for Bert Nash that came to us.
I'll recommend that. I may butcher the name, Irrit Gilleth. Do you know?
Do you know how to
it's
pronounce her
Gil.
last? I think that's what he's asking, Karen. Do you know how?
I spoke with Irit. We didn't talk about her last name.
Yeah,
so.
well, I talked to her too, but she didn't tell me how to pronounce her name. So
We've got her information and we'll.
yeah. Anyway, she's a chief marketing officer of an IT firm. She's got a bachelor's in industrial engineering and an MBA. She has interest in serving on the Bert Nash board, so I recommend her appointment.
I would gladly second that. I did have a good phone conversation with her. This was actually some time back. This went from being a county appointee to being a joint city-county appointee, so it took a little bit more time there. But I think she's a fabulous addition. I'd be glad to second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. I did say I would talk to Steve Munch. I didn't get to it this week. I will get to it this coming week. So thank you for your patience on that, commissioners. We have until the end of May, so we got a little bit of time. Any other appointments we need to take care of this evening? I don't think we had any others. Okay. We'll go on to commissioner or administrator miscellaneous. And we typically start with Sarah's memo.
Thanks, Commissioners. Attached is my updated memo. A lot of dates coming in over the next couple of weeks. So I want to make sure, I know we're going to probably have more than 2 commissioners at the Rural Living Resource Fairs. So we'll make sure we notice that as a meeting. Our next meeting will be Monday and in Eudora. Eudora's joint meeting with Eudora City Council. I'm still working to firm up that agenda and that location. So I'll share that and update that notice as soon as, I think we're at City Hall, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'll confirm that. Just want to make sure commissioners have on their calendar, we're getting really excited about Douglas County Discovery Day on Tuesday, April 29th. Carrie Britt and her team are doing a ton of work to get some really fun things going at that. So want to make sure if commissioners are able to attend that they can do so. And there is an attachment to your memo related to the City of Eudora's public hearing regarding some industrial revenue bonds and exemption from property tax for a multi-family project. So that our notice on that is what you get in that packet. And we have a pre-veto session report from Little Government Relations. Next week, you're going to start with a work session on what I call our core or central services. So IT, maintenance, and administration. And commissioners, that's all I have.
Thank you, Sarah. Commissioners, any miscellaneous items? All right, if there's none, we are adjourned.